Good evening. Welcome to the May 15th Village Board Legislative Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge. Public, a nation, God.
Trustee Bazemore, Trustee Levin, Trustee Herrera, Trustee Gazada,
Present.
Mayor Garrity.
Present.
The first item on the agenda is a special presentation for Boating Safety Week.
Yep. Everybody want to come down?
Sure.
I'm sorry I didn't ask earlier.
I'm a designated photographer. Designated photographer.
All right. So I'm delighted. This evening we are joined by former trustee Bob Duraio, but that's not the capacity in which he's in here tonight. Tonight we're here to talk about National Boating Safety Week. And it's particularly significant to us here in Ossining, in part because we're a Hudson River community, and so we take boating safety very seriously. But also, we had some particularly significant legislation that came as a result of the dedication of folks, including Robert Duraio, in New York State to strengthen the boating safety laws that we have here in New York. And that came about as a result of a tragedy. We lost a young man who was born and raised in Ossining. Well, do you want to talk about it a little bit, Bob? Tell us why this is so significant to you. Not only is boating significant to you, but this legislation is, please.
Well, after 9/11, a bunch of us listened to George W. Bush, who called everybody to volunteer something, and we were a group of guys working at Channel 11 who were too old to join the military. But we found out about the Coast Guard Auxiliary and joined that. And I've spent the last 17 years and change teaching boating safety classes and doing vessel safety exams to try and impress upon people that you don't need to drown. Wear a life jacket. Don't just have it on your boat. Wear it. It's not going to help you if it's put away in its plastic wrap in a compartment and you're in the water. You're going to go out boating, wear your life jacket. Most people who drown because they weren't wearing their life jacket. And the second most important reason people drown is because they're boating under the influence. Don't drink and boat. The police take it very seriously. If you drink while you're boating, the cops will provide the chaser. And it works just like a DWI. Don't do it. More importantly, take a boating safety class. When Brian drowned, there was a bill that our Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff and our Senator Dave Carlucci had been working on to have New York State require people to take a boating safety course, and it was stalled in committee. But when Brian drowned, and we spent so much time looking for him, and it was everything that was wrong. No life jackets, no lights on the boat, no radio, people had been drinking. Everything that could possibly be done wrong had been done wrong. And as a result, this promising young man lost his life. And that was the impetus that pushed the boating safety bill over the top. And now, like New Jersey and Connecticut, if you want to boat on the river, you got to take an 8-hour boating safety course. It's offered by the New York State Department of Recreation. It's offered by the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary and the U.S. Power Squadrons. If you Google any of that, you can find the nearest boating safety course. They're given all year round. Just gave one on Saturday. We also do vessel safety checks. They're free. We come on your boat. We make sure you have all the proper safety equipment. We check to make sure there's no big hole in it so you don't sink. And you get a little sticker that goes on your boat, and it lets the law enforcement world know that you are having a safe boat. You also get a 10 to 15% discount on your bonus insurance, depending on which insurance company you're with. National Safe Boating Week is about publicizing it. And our mayor and the trustees are kind enough to give me a couple of minutes to promote this. So again, wear your life jacket, take a boating safety class, don't drink and boat, and get a free vessel safety check. Those things will keep you alive and let you really enjoy being out on our wonderful river. Thank you.
Bob. Thank you for all of those excellent pieces of advice. And with that, I will move on to the lower whereases. Whereas we urge all those who boat to practice safe boating habits and wear a life jacket at all times while boating. Now therefore, I, Victoria Garrity, Mayor of the Village of Ossining, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, residents, and merchants of the village, do hereby support the efforts of the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary in achieving the goals of the North American Safe Boating Campaign and proclaim May 18th through 24th, 2019 as National Safe Boating Week here in the Village of Ossining, and the start of the year-round effort to promote safe boating. Thank you very much.
So the next item on our agenda is a public hearing in the matter of Local Law 3, titled A Local Law Amending Chapter 6, Boards and Commission of the Village of Ossining Code. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board on this public hearing?
Stuart, do you want to give a thumbnail recap of what this public hearing is referring to?
Thank you, Mayor. This would allow for the appointment of up to 2 alternate members for the village's 4 land use boards: Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, Historic Preservation Commission, and Environmental Advisory Council. The alternates would be called upon if needed for a quorum and for a vote. They would be held to the same attendance and training requirements as the other members of the boards, and would be appointed for the same length of terms as the other members of the boards. But this way, it would help us to ensure that we would have, at a minimum, a quorum for all of our meetings of our important land use boards.
Is there anyone who would like to comment on this proposed legislation? The next public hearing will begin next. Did you want to comment on this legislation, please? Welcome.
Planning and or zoning board, correct?
As well as the EAC and the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay. A suggestion has to do with all of those boards. You have somebody on staff who is all over like horse manure, just all over. He can't put in so many hours. Get yourself, you guys have to hire another deputy corporation counsel, because it is not fair to put Mr. Kahan at all of these meetings, at all of the zoning meetings, and all the planning board meetings. So we do need alternates for this, but we also need an alternate corporation counsel. And I say this with love and devotion. He's spread too thin. Thank you.
Thank you. We agree.
I'm sure that
We are.
I'm sure that the members of my family will enjoy me being compared to horse manure, but that will be just fine.
In a good
Thank
way.
you, Linda. I appreciate it.
Do we want to acknowledge that we're putting out an RF?
We are, yes. In response to what Ms. Mangano said, but we will be putting out a request for proposals, not just because of what Linda said, but we will be putting out a request for proposals for a special counsel to handle land use duties for the Village of Ossining, specifically with regard to planning and zoning boards. So I hope to have that available to the board shortly, and then we can go from there.
Thank you. Are there, I'm sorry, let me close that public hearing. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this proposed law? Are you interested in speaking on the proposed, this one? Okay, welcome.
Good evening. I think that the proposal is extraordinarily wise, and there's another reason, which is that you develop, by having these alternates, possible future members that are informed and educated. And that's very important, since many times the first couple of sessions is a training session. And if you have a farm team, as it were, with these alternates, be very positive and helpful, the transitions as these boards go through time. Sometimes projects have to go through a number of boards. It's a few times.
Understood. Agreed. Providing greater continuity of membership is certainly one of the other benefits to this proposal. Is there anybody else who would like to comment on proposed local law 3 regarding amending the land use boards, provide for alternates? Okay, so then shall we have a motion to close the public hearing on proposed local law number 3?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Jan?
The next public hearing is in the matter of to consider the application by Ossining Land LLC for a planned waterfront special permit pursuant to Village Code Section 270-23I and 270-53. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board?
It appears there is.
Hi,
Welcome.
again. My name's Annie Klein. I'm an associate at Dalbello, Donnell, and Weinger, and Wise and Whitaker, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Ossining Land LLC and the application for the planned special waterfront permit. So would you like a presentation? I have Stuart is here. Stuart. Ed is here. He's the architect to go over the specifics of the density bonus that we're asking for as part of this this permit. But just to refresh your memory, project is located at 34 State Street, 21 James Street, and 27 Hunter Street. It's property, well, it's 3 parcels, but it's approximately 5.9 acres total. It's in the PWC zoning district, and the project consists of the demolition of the existing manufacturing building, the construction of 3 residential buildings. The 2 contain a total of 189 residential units with 19 affordable units, and the restoration of the Smith Robinson House, which will be used as office space. The project was previously approved. Those approvals have expired. So we are here, we are at the planning board, and we received the variances that were required from the Zoning Board of Appeals last night. So the planned special waterfront permit will provide us with the density bonus to have the 189 units. And as part of that permit, we are providing several amenities, and those include the rehabilitation of the historic structure, which is the Smith Robinson House, green building, and also off-site community infrastructure improvements, which Ed can go through. And we are proposing to be LEED Gold, which is better than the code requires LEED Silver. So we also, as part of the design of this project, have a lot of open space on the site, and so there's an automated parking garage in building 2, which we received variances for last night. That allowed half an acre of open space on the top of the site, and then there's 30,000 square feet of open space on the slope down to Hunter Street. So it's a very green project, and we're excited to get this started, and Ed can go over the specific off-site improvements. And please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Welcome.
Evening. My name is Ed Vogel with Warschauer Maluzzi Warschauer, architects involved in this exciting project. As was stated, this is for a reapproval of a project that had expired or lapsed. Regarding the bonus densities, there are 6 criteria that will be implemented. The first I'd like to speak about is not only the preservation of the Smith-Robinson House, but it is the restoration of the Smith-Robinson House. Here at the Smith-Robinson House, it has over time devolved into what you see today. So we're looking to not only preserve, but to restore. There is a whole ground or base level that needs to be opened up. Stairs leading up to the first floor will be totally reconfigured to align with what was originally there. We will then also on the front porch recreate the balusters and the railings which have long since been gone. And then finally up on the roof, the cupola will be reinstated. For the rear of the building, we will also be reinstating some porches that have long been stripped away and enclosed with other buildings. Regarding green building design, we are targeting LEED Gold, which is certainly better than the LEED Silver, and those standards are still in play and will be executed. There are some other off-street improvements. There are some streetscape and crosswalks along Hunter and along James, and the sidewalks will be improved, and we have some crosswalks across Secor and I believe it's Maine. We also have off-site improvements, which would be stormwater and along James Street, Boulder-Sac, as it turns into a paper street and drops down toward Hunter Street. It's commonly referred to as Breakneck Path, but there's also some stormwater improvements along that pathway and a walkway for the public community to have better connectivity toward the train station. There is sanitary lines along James, along State Street, that will be videotaped, and if there is anything found to be not in order, our project proposes to do those repairs. And then finally, there is a water main relining. This work, we understand, has already been executed by the village. A part of our commitment was that 2 segments in and around our site are to be relined, and our client will be reimbursing the village for that work. Those are the 6 improvements for the bonus density. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Fraley, you've been involved in this project for a number of years. Could you remind me the water main relining project? What was the dollar amount that was associated with that, and at what point in the contract is that going to be reimbursed?
I believe the agreement as it stands today is a reimbursement upon issuance of your first C of O, and I think that's still what's in place today. I appreciate the very detailed explanation of the infrastructure improvements. It goes a long way with getting that stuff all vetted out before we start. The sanitary line work that he referenced is not only what we ask for internally, but also something that the County Department of Environmental Facilities looks for municipalities to do when developers of this nature come in to lessen the load on the county's wastewater treatment facilities. So it's good that they're doing that. The water project that you asked for, Mayor, for more detail for Mayor, is the water lining project that the Water Department undertook, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, more or less. And we took at the time calculated a prorated section of line that ran the perimeter of those parcels that were discussed earlier, and took the total contract amount and took that portion, and it equaled, I think, $192,000, which would be reimbursed prior to issuance of the first C of O in the first building.
The sanitary lines, that amount is yet unknown. Is that what I'm understanding?
We've done that. We've done that 3 times. I'm going to say in the last 10 years, and it really is a moving number because we know there are some conditions with the line, but it's really hard to detail the exact work that goes into the improvement. It could be something as easy as spot repairs, or it might be something as elaborate as spot repairs followed by full-length lining, and that is something that we really do not determine until the camera and the field study work is done.
And at what point in the process is the field study work done, and at what point in the process is the infrastructure improvement done, and when is the village, I assume the village does the work and it gets reimbursed for it? When does that all
No,
happen?
not in that case.
Oh,
The
good.
water lining was something that we did because it was part of a larger project, but everything else will be the developer's contractor doing the work with our under our watch. Um, Typically, it's done when the site work's done because they are tying into all those lines, and it's really the practical time to do it, to do all the subsurface work necessary around the perimeter and on site. So I would say early on, prior to you see the structures proper being completed.
Okay. And you use the term targeting LEED Gold. I know one of the tricky things about LEED is that the certification process happens long after the building is inhabited. So you're targeting LEED Gold, and that's the intention, and we'll find out if that was the case after all is said and done. Okay, just for folks who aren't as familiar with that as we grow to be. Stuart, could you explain, reiterate for us the what exactly it is that the board is? We have a public hearing today. We could close the public hearing after tonight. We could do what?
Mayor, before I get that, let me just
Please.
follow something up that Ms. Klein said in terms of last night at the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
As Ms. Klein indicated, the board did grant two groups of variances, is the best way to put it. One deals with the building height for one particular building, and the other deals with parking, specifically with regard to dimensions of the parking, because they're using the robotic parking. So they will be smaller spaces. The angles that they need will be less than what we have under our code, and that need not be just two tandem parking. It could be up to 4 cars in terms of how it's going to be parked for purposes of that. There was a condition put on it by the board that the developer would comply with the village's Vacant Building Registration Act in terms of what needs to be done to maintain, particularly both the Smith Robinson House, but also the Printex building, which is the building that is still up and to come down. I am advised today by the building inspector, Joe Agostinelli, that an application was submitted for a demolition permit. They are in the process of getting, from what I understand, the prior demo bond extended so that it would then cover this particular project. And the person who was in the building department today is someone who does a large number of construction and demo projects in the village, and indicated he was prepared to, proceed, expeditiously with regard to that. In response, Mayor, to your question.
I'm sorry, but before you go on, I just want to ask about the demo permit and the condition that was put on by the ZBA, which regarding the vacant properties, is in order to be in compliance with the vacant properties regulations, does the demolition have to be completed by a certain date?
No, well,
or is that not exactly related?
No, because the demo permit itself has a 1-year time frame before it lapses. However, under the terms of the vacant building registry, there are certain actions that need to be taken by the builder even before he starts his work, getting the building covered up, making sure that it's all power is off, which is in this case. Here, it's primarily to get it all covered up. What the board has indicated is that they want that done within 30 days of the issuance of their resolution. That resolution will be issued next month, because we do it on a 1-month lag in terms of issuing it. And if it's not done within that 30-day period, the developer would be asked to come back to the Zoning Board of Appeals to effectively explain what the status is. So that's where that is right now. It could be obviated if the Printex building is in fact demolished in the interim, because that way you would not be under the vacant building. Although I should point out that the Smith Robinson House itself is still a vacant building and obviously has to be protected for a variety of reasons, not just because it's vacant, but because it is in fact a landmark building that's going to be preserved with regard to this project.
Thank you.
With regard to what is before the board now, it is for a special waterfront permit. Under the terms of the code, when this board declares the hearing closed, it has up to 62 days to issue its determination. Previously, when this was before the board or before prior boards of trustees, the application was granted for the special waterfront permit, and I believe there were perhaps 2, maybe as many as 3 extensions that were granted with regard to that. But that was granted previously. So it will come. It's now before this board for the requested public hearing. The planning board has issued a recommendation that the permit be granted. And just in terms of how process is working out, now that the zoning board has issued the variances, this matter will now go back to the planning board for site plan approval and for a conditional use permit. And it will appear on the planning board's agenda on the 28th of May. It's been on the agenda before, but it's been held while we've been waiting for the zoning board to issue its determination, and that was issued last night.
Okay. Please, anybody else have questions for Paul or Stuart or our guests?
I have a question of clarity. Stuart, can you please let me know who determines what a public amenity is or is not?
Well, two things. One, in our code, we have the different categories of public amenities that would allow the 10% density bonus. So they list what those are. Effectively, though, in the way the code is, that's really a planning board determination as to what the particular amenity, in terms of what they're doing in terms of the amenities. But the amenities here, as just to go into it, and Mr. Vogel was talking about it, there's a whole group of them which go from, as they talked about, preserving the historic area, connecting to the Riverwalk, preserving views of the Hudson River, sensitive areas. There's a variety of those in there, and each of them could result in a benefit of a 10% density bonus, but you can't get more density bonus than you're permitted under our bulk requirements. So you couldn't essentially do all 10, get 120% density bonus. But at the end of the day, the planning board is the one who looks at this, but this board is required by the code to be the one to actually issue the permit.
Got it. Okay. I just because I said it once and I'll say it again. I am glad that they are going to be preserving and restoring the Smith Robinson house. But to my knowledge, or at least how I feel, is that they have to do that anyways, and it's being used for a private. It's not a public building. So I just don't view it as a public amenity. That's all.
And I should point out, Trustee Herrera, just with regard to Smith Robinson, I know that we're arranging for visits by members of the HGC to actually go there and see it. I think we're going to probably do it in 2 different visits so that we can get everybody there and to see it, so they can see what the condition is and what's going on there. There was a certificate of appropriateness that's issued previously. There was also recently the Environmental Advisory Council held a hearing with regard to this project. They had a number of comments, which I know went to Ms. Klein, so that will also get back so that they can issue their that there is a consistency determination under the village's LWRP.
Others with questions and comments?
I just had one, a little bit playing off what Trustee Herrera said. So we've had another developer, nothing to do with you, before us a number of times, where historical buildings, things happen to them, especially if nothing is done to protect them. So what protection does the village have that during this
The demolition of the
Well,
attached buildings?
I'm trying to find a nice way to say this. During this process, a truck hits the building, whatever, who's responsible for it? That's a historic building. And, we've had developers basically let things fall apart and then say, well, the weather caused it. But in fact, they could have prevented it, in my humble opinion. But now we have another historical piece. And I do agree that I find it odd that we call anything a public property when in fact the public has no access to it and can't really use it. It's actually being used for commercial use. I don't object to the commercial use. I just don't understand the definition here. So it sounds anti-intuitive, but my concern is who is ensuring, who's guaranteeing the value of a historical building during this process if something happens to it?
What I can say, and I'll also let Mr. Vogel and Ms. Klein comment if they, after I'm finished, is that part of the application for the demo permit relating to the Printex building are specific plans as to how the area is going to be protected, which would include the Smith Robinson building. And that's already been submitted to Mr. Augustinelli. They also have to, as I mentioned, have a bond, and they're getting a bond in this particular case. It is a landmark building on their property, and they have obligations under our code, section 270-25, to maintain that building, not allow it to become demolition by neglect, which is specifically written into our code. So those would all be obligations of the builder, and that would include protecting the Smith Robinson house. One of the things that has been mentioned at the HPC meetings is to, in fact, make sure that the building is protected during the course of the construction project. So that's both during the demo as well as to whatever they're going to have to do. It would be necessary to have that. That can certainly and would be certainly be a condition of any site plan approval in terms of put down by the planning board in terms of protecting the existing historic building that's there. In terms of the demolition permit, that's part of the protective plan that's already been provided to the building department.
And the second question is the EAC, when they went through it, since I was there, you got a lot of questions. It wasn't just a few. So what is the process of timing on that? And out of that conversation, there were some really other things, but what is the process of the different boards? So when does the EAC have to get its answers before it goes somewhere else?
Well, I think the EAC meets again, they'd be June the 4th. And hopefully they can have all the information in advance of that date so that they can, on the 4th, consider what they have and then make, fill out the consistency document and come in and then provide that back to the lead agency, which in this case is the planning board.
Okay, so then they get something that goes back to the planning board.
Right.
So that would be in June.
That would be the planning, and the planning board would then have that for their June 25th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Others with questions or comments?
No.
Then I guess, oh, please.
So we're going to go back to sort of what we talked about last time in the work session. So you have now obtained a demolition permit, which was obtained several years back. And one of the reasons why nothing happened there was because it was finances haven't met. What is the difference now you obtaining a demo permit for the rest of the building? Where's the finances on this point? What are the finances right now and current for this particular project? And more like a request to the board, I guess, is we do have an agreement. I would like to see if I have the backing of the board is I would like to look into this agreement that we have, because I would like to have I'd like to open that and see a couple items in there. I definitely wouldn't want to see this particular project to stay open for another 4 years, and yet we have done all the work and we have not seen any of that money. So that's sort of my concerns at this point. I have several other ones, but I'm just going to leave that. It's up to the board, I guess, if they want to open the agreement that we have this particular project. But definitely, it's really nice to see pictures of the grass being cut, trim a couple days after or before this particular application goes into one of the planning boards, zoning boards, or architecture review board. So I would like to see if that keeps up for the rest of the time, which I've mentioned that before, and nothing has happened through the years. So that's some of the several concerns that I have. Again, I would like to know what is the finances, because last time you mentioned that you're looking to finance this project. So what does that mean for us at the end of the day?
Trustee Quezada, I just want to correct one thing.
Yes.
An application for a demo permit has been
Has
filed.
not been obtained.
The permit has not
Correct.
yet been issued.
Right. Thank you, sir. But hold on. So on the zoning board, one of the previous emails that was sent out to us said that they weren't looking into doing an application for the demo permit just yet. And yet this morning, an application was submitted.
You are correct. That was the
Okay.
statement that was made last night.
Okay.
I'm Barnett Liberman. I'm one of the principals in the Ossining Land LLC. And to address your very important points on the financing is the financing, construction loan is what we need to get to proceed with the construction. To close the construction loan, we first have to have all of the entitlements. And once we have that, we have to get the permit. Once the permit is issued, that'll be an element of the closing documents required to get the advances under the construction loan. We have a commitment from the Sterling National Bank for the construction loan, and we have commitments from investors also subject to the entitlements. The additional equity, in addition to the almost $20 million that I have invested, the additional equity investors will be putting money in after the entitlements are issued. They don't want to take the risk that they're not issued. So the two elements of financing, the construction financing and the additional equity, are both contingent upon the entitlements and the permit.
What is the difference between now and 4 years ago? When you had all the permits, when you had all the requirements.
Oh, we did not have the construction loan commitment 4 years ago.
Now you do.
Yes.
So you obtained that in the past month and a half.
No, we attained that about a year and a half ago, right? Yeah, about a year and a half ago.
You obtained the financials about a year and a half?
Yes.
Okay, because about a month and a half to 2 months, when you guys came in front of us in a work session, you did not have the finances in place.
Well, it depends what you mean by in place.
We were looking for money for investors.
We are looking, and we still look for investors. Yes, there's equity investors and there's debt financing. We have a commitment for the debt financing, not the equity. We have some equity investors, and we're looking for more, but they will be contingent upon the entitlements being issued.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat? You said now you have the money for construction.
We have I'll be clear.
Okay.
We have a commitment for a construction loan. The construction loan will not be closed until the construction permits are issued. The construction permits are a required document for the mortgage to be placed on the property. That's the construction loan mortgage.
When did you get the commitments for the construction loan?
That's what I said, about a year and a half
Year
ago.
and a half ago.
Yeah. We need to get
I don't want to go around and around circles, but do you have the money to do, let's say at the end of the week, our building department gives you a demolition permit. You have the money, the finances, everything ready to start demolishing the rest of the buildings.
We can start demolition within the 30 days, yes.
Within 30 days?
Yes. We will not be able to start the excavation, the site improvements. Those are all very expensive and will require the closing of the construction loan to get the funding necessary to fund that. So we need the entitlements and then the permit to get the real money.
I'm actually not sure that this is a condition that is part of our consideration of whether or not we close the public hearing, but I think it does sort of raise the question, if the construction loan financing was in place a year and a half ago you had all of the permits active.
We didn't. We never got the permits is the issue.
I mean, but you had all of your approvals.
We had the entitlements, yes. We had the entitlements.
Right, so if you had the all of the approvals from the land use boards and this board, and you had the construction financing in place, as I recall, there was a request that came to the village for a pilot at that time, and we were told that unless we granted a many, many year pilot, that the financing would not be available for the project. And I think what my colleagues may be asking is, are we going to end up in that same condition? Again, I'm not sure that we need to consider that this permit application, but it is a question that is now being asked.
It's an important question. The financing is critical. The market will support this project. We're very enthusiastic about the success of the project. We're very proud to have a project that is 62% of the open land is being preserved. I think it's probably more than any other apartment project that's probably in the county, to have that much of the land of the project preserved and open and not paved over. So and the views are extraordinary. We're very, very enthusiastic about it. But we do need to have those elements, which are the entitlements to begin, basic work like the demolition, which we will fund that with equity, part of the equity, and the major part is the permit, so we could close a construction loan.
Can you give me your name again?
Barnett Liberman, Liberman.
And I just want to piggyback on what the mayor said, because my understanding is you did file for a foundation permit and you did file for architectural drawings and engineer drawings last year as well.
We did file, yes.
Okay. So at that time,
It wasn't granted.
it wasn't granted because of what, I just want to make sure that that is actually part of, I want to say, the record. But, I don't want to have this back and forth discussion. And like the mayor said, this part doesn't actually is part of the special permit that you guys require. I
You
just
have
want
a
to make
general
sure the public is
responsibility.
aware of what has happened to this particular project, but it's not just because of we have not met our
Oh,
requirements.
no,
It's
no,
because
no.
of what you guys have
I didn't
done
mean to
in
imply
the
that.
past for not making this project happen.
I didn't mean to imply that you were obstructing at all. As it happened, we had submitted the plans, and the plans were then forwarded to the ICC, which is an organization that reviews the code compliance of these plans of major projects for lots of towns and villages that don't have the full staff to review a complex project like this. And so they serve a very important purpose. They had, when we first applied for a foundation application, they rejected it because they would only do that, and their reasoning was reasonable. They would only do that if they had the complete plans so they could fully evaluate whether or not there was enough foundation to support what was going above it. So that was actually a fairly reasonable position. So we weren't complete yet to submit those plans. And when we did submit them, there was a back and forth whether or not they would accept electronic or in print and how many copies. We lost some time there. And then, unfortunately, Ed's associate, who was following up and responding to those questions, died. And that was tragic. He's a young man, a family, and we ran out of time on the entitlements is what happened. So then we had to restart the process, which is why we're here now.
I still would like to see if the rest of the board members would like to reopen the agreement that we have with this particular applicant.
I don't know that that's our role.
That would be a separate discussion. It's not part of the permit process that we're talking about here. There was an agreement which was back in 2014, I think, or 2015.
February
which was
15.
Between the developer and the village with regard to various infrastructure projects which included the water line that we've been talking about.
Okay, can I ask is that something that would be appropriate to include in next week's work session as a discussion?
We can have that as a discussion next week, yes.
Not yet, not yet.
Outside this month.
It's only the 4th. There will be a
never
5th. Next.
Sorry.
Okay, so we'll tentatively say that we'll discuss that next week, but for the purposes of tonight, getting back to the public hearing, does the board feel that we need to keep the public hearing open, or would we like to close the public hearing this evening? The reason to keep the public hearing open, I imagine, is if we have unresolved questions related to this particular special permit, or if you feel that others in the public need to be heard on this.
I have no problem keeping it open.
I second that one.
All right, we have a motion to keep the public hearing open until we need a date. Yes, it would be June 5th.
Any other information you need in the meantime, or any reason why we need to come back? No? Okay.
You don't actually have to come back. So there's a motion to keep the public hearing open until the June 5th legislative session. There's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you.
We'll be back in 3 weeks, because we will enjoy that fifth Wednesday off.
Mayors and trustees announcements.
I'm sure someone else has announcements. Please go right ahead. Knocks them off my list.
Good evening, everyone. So at first, I want to congratulate the Ossining Chamber of Commerce. Yesterday at the Briarcliff Manor, they held their inaugural Small Business Milestone Awards breakfast and ceremony, honoring the many successes, milestones, and impact of small businesses of over 25 Ossining businesses, everything from 5-year, 10-year, 25, 50, 75, and 125-year awards. So congratulations to all honorees. Next week, this coming Tuesday, the Ossining Public Library will be having their budget vote and their trustee election. That's Tuesday, May 21st from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. at Ossining High School. And more information about the proposed budget for the library and the trustee candidates can be found at the budget page of ossininglibrary.org. Many of you guys have been following the Project Greenlight campaign that this board, along with our police chief and many other electeds, about Project Greenlight. The New York Immigration Coalition, better known as NYIC, is coordinating their final day of action on May 21st in Albany to support driver's licenses for all New Yorkers. This is the last chance to show Albany how important it is, and we need your support. So if you're from Ossining and you want to hop on a bus, it's free. Neighbors Link is coordinating that. You can call 914-666-34110. And my last thing is, yesterday I traveled to Albany with my fellow colleague, trustee Quantel Bazemore, officially representing the village, as well as my mother and thousands of tenants and activists with Local Progress, Community Voices Heard, Citizens Action New York, and many other people-led grassroots organizations to make sure that when New York rent laws expire on June 15th, they are strengthened and expanded to cover all tenants in Ossining, Westchester, and overall New York State. I was so proud to be part of a fight for stronger tenant rights and join so many from upstate to downstate. However, we just have 30 days as of today. Millions of rent-stabilized New Yorkers could lose their homes thanks to weak renters' rights. Millions more don't have rights at all. That's why we joined the tenant power movement, and it's why we're fighting in Albany for the next 30 days as well. Later in this meeting, we'll be discussing how the village can be a leader in this crucial and historic moment. Thank you.
Others with announcements? Okay, well, thank you. You shortened my list. I'll just add the day of action. If you are someone who's on Facebook and you're interested in participating in the Greenlight New York Day of Action, there is a Facebook event page that has some additional information about how you can attend and participate next Tuesday. It's called Greenlight Albany Day of Action. It's a Facebook event, so that might be helpful for getting information. Then this weekend, there are a couple of fun, exciting things going on, one of which has been organized by our Recreation Department. It is Stash the Trash and Beautification Projects that'll be happening this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, and folks are invited to clean up and pretty up 4 of our parks. You can visit the assume it's on the recreation. It's on. Everybody gets an email, so I assume it's on the village website under the recreation page, and learn more about it, or just call directly to the recreation department and sign up, or you can show up at one of the parks when you go and look. Groups, organizations, scout troops, your church group, your neighbors, you and your child, you're all welcome to join in at one of the parks. I know one of them they're doing stuff in the aqueduct, they're doing stuff at we call it Triangle Park, but it's Arthur Jones Park. What are the other 2 parks? Arthur Jones Park. Do you know what the other parks are? No. You just knew what Triangle Park was, right? Yeah. Arthur Jones Park and two of the other village parks, and they're escaping me right now, but that'll be Saturday morning from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. Learn more about that from the Recreation Department. And it's going to be cleaning up as well as doing some planting and raking and all sorts of good work there. Happening on both Saturday and Sunday, there's an event going on across the river. It's called Lab Fest. It's something art and beer fest. But the reason why that's relevant to us here is that a lot of participants are being encouraged to take the train up. And as they do so, they will be going through Henry Gordine Park. And the Ossining Arts Council is going to be there from 12 noon to 4 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday with some live music and encouraging folks when they are on their way back through Ossining to, letting them know all the great arts and cultural things we have going on here. And the Ossining Arts Council partnered with the Ossining Arts Project and the Village of Ossining. Thank you to Jamie Hoffman, who's not with us this evening, but she was instrumental in working with folks to put together this new map and listing. It's called Explore Ossining 2019. It's got a map of the village with an inset of the downtown, which identifies where a number of these wonderful places to eat, drink, take a walk, and appreciate arts and culture in Ossining are happening. And so we're hoping that the first time this will be handed out will be this weekend as folks are coming back from Lab Fest at the Garner Arts Center across the river. But now that we have these maps, they'll likely start seeing them more often. All right.
Mayor Garrity?
Yes.
I totally forgot one very important announcement.
Certainly.
Many parents and neighbors have been asking about this. So I do have an update on the Hudson Link resident pilot program on Washington Avenue. The executive director is technically postponing the public meeting until they receive their CO and they open their doors. So he did respond to me today. He is looking forward to the community meeting, and hopefully once they open, I could have a date and I could share it with the board and the parents and the stakeholders, and we could schedule it and be, educated about what the pilot program means in Ossining. Thank you.
Anyone else? Madam Clerk.
Sure. Village Manager, Acting Village Manager, Paul Fioli.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Board. This evening, the Mayor ended her announcements recognizing some of the work that Jamie was doing in the office. The other thing I'm going to start with is something that Jamie is spearheading out of the manager's office, and that is the lucky fourth time around for submittal of our DRI application in the fourth round of that grant that comes out of the governor's office. It's due May 30th. We're actually having a draft review of our application this Friday. It's another fever pitch effort, and I think this is the year. So enough about that. Next time I report on that, I'll be
Just let Governor Cuomo know.
Spend the money. Some time ago, initiated by someone from the public with regard to parking in the State Street and Spring Street corridors came to our attention, and we discussed it in the work session a little bit. And I just wanted to update everybody on that. I've been back and forth with Chief Sylvester and Council Kahan with regard to some changes that we might want to implement on Academy Place and Church Street. And what was ultimately determined after discussions with you all and internally was that we were going to mirror the parking regulations that are on State Street now, that being alternate side overnight parking. And what's left to be done on that is Council Khan just notifying the clerk's office formally in writing that the change of the parking regulations, and then we have to hang the signs, and then everything will be in place at that point.
Hey, Paul, can I just correct? You said Church Street and Academy Place. I think you meant Academy Place in St. Paul's.
I'm sorry. Yes, St. Paul's.
Church Street would be problematic.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It has a church on it. That's what threw me off. Thank you, Chief Sylvester. So with some of the transitions that are going on in Human Resource Department, which I'll discuss in a little more detail in the exec session, I did want to recognize a couple of people stepping up with some of the things we have going on this month. Specifically, Nancy Conklin and Mike Duffy have really taken the reins of the training that's going on in conjunction with the PESH training that we're using. Our annual consultant with that is starting to take place up at the Operations Center. That's attended by the majority of personnel in the village. That's also supplemented with active shooter training that's administered by the police department, and that's going on as part of that training. So that's a good thing. And those were all things that we're going to keep on going during this transition period as we transition into our new manager and determine how we're going to handle that on a long-term basis. One of the things I did in my acting role was attend the Mid-Hudson Ambulance District meeting. And one of the things that came out of that as one of the conversations there digressed into my role as village engineer was site plan review, what have you, and response and safety. And one of the things I committed to do with that meeting, which I just discussed with Stuart earlier, is to make sure that not just the fire department, but Ossining Volunteer Ambulance District company rather, and the volunteer fire department are formally made interested parties in all seeker review of any of these developments that are going on. I mean, you see the type of developments that are happening late of late in Ossining, and their review is a key component, and making them a formal interested party during the seeker process is paramount. So we're looking forward to doing that because OVAC never has been, so now they will be. A couple of mentions on what's going on in the field. I think you just saw that we completed Underhill Avenue full length. I will tell you that because of the monies that were allocated last year, a lot of the pre-construction work, like a lot of the curb replacement that we did in-house with the in-house staff, we're paying for out of our operating budget, and a lot of the concrete work we did in advance on some of the sidewalks and the ramps and what have you, were done out of the previously supplied capital budget in the concrete line. Allowed us to. I haven't finalized the tickets yet on the invoice, but the entire cost of that work will be paid for by CHIPS money, which is given to us by the state. So that's a good thing because it's not really going against our debt service, and it won't be until paving later in the summer, which once the new manager starts, I will sit with her and go over my druthers and the budget at the time, whatever's left over in the capital paving line, and I'll bring it back to the board and say, this is what I intend to do, and this is how we intend to pay for it. But they did supply 2019 CHIPS money again, which included Pave New York money. So we're going to get another $300,000 at least from the state again this year, which is a good thing. Some resolution comments I want to make here, going through it. On Resolution C, that is different than, I'm not sure if Bill Garrison had brought it to the board, but one of the things we're doing for the basketball improvements is we're adopting a consortium out of Greece, New York, to help him refurbish Nielsen and Snowden Park and Vets Park basketball courts. Very high-end restoration, and that's the project that I think we should all be looking forward to. It's going to be a real nice project when it's done. But Bill had went out and found a consortium bid on projects of that nature. He and I are meeting the contractor to scope that out next Thursday, and Tom has already accepted it as part of our procurement policy, satisfying our procurement policy, and that's in state, and that's why we did it internally with Tom's sign off. Resolution C is the same thing. It's a consortium for Pierce fire apparatus. I believe it's for hollow hose. The reason that's on here as a resolution, though, is because it's out of state. It's out of Texas. So because of that, he's bringing it forth in a resolution, and that's why you're going to vote on it tonight. On Resolution D, the authorizing me to sign the Lynstaar engineering contract. That's what Andy and the fire chiefs detailed for you last week in the work session. The agenda there is to get the design, as stated in the work session, completed with an estimate completed. So we would have a bid document and a very appropriate ask during the capital budget of the fire department. When they sit, they'll know exactly how much they ask for instead of just throwing a dart at it. And then, you know, we can get a better handle on our debt service. That will have the design and the bid documents done. And we're not asking for more than we need, or they're not asking for more than they need. And that's what the finance modification is right under there relative to that work. Resolution F is really a housekeeping item. We had, as you know, at the beginning of every year for the non-union personnel in the village administration, they have the management benefit plan, which basically covers us with regard to health and other benefits we get for working here. And someone within that management benefit plan has changed titles based on some follow-up administrative work they were doing with Westchester County personnel. And with that new title, he will be still covered under the management benefit plan when you pass that resolution. That's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Paul, I just want to ask a question, or just at least for a point of clarity. For the signs, I didn't want to interrupt because I know you're going through your list. So for the signage and the parking, I think it would be helpful because we have at least one member of the public that wants to know why it's not up, and we all get the emails. So could you just clarify a ballpark of how many in months before the signs go up and it's all completed? Because I heard what you said, but one person hears that and thinks it's a week or so, another person hears it 10 months, just so people expectations are set. I assume you have to make up the signs and then put them in the ground and do lining and all. I mean, there's work to be done, and it'll rain, all sorts of stuff, right? So a ballpark so that people have an understanding.
Well, my intent is, Stuart just whispered in my ear 30
Yes,
days.
we heard it all the way up here, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
Not very sotto voce.
So I'm not going to wait for that to come back in the 30 days. We could start putting up the posts and the signs and just cover them until it's actually enforceable, and then we'll reveal them when Stuart says it's okay to do so.
So if the public asks, you think 30 days from today, 60 days from today would be reasonable?
I think within 60 days it'll be
60
enforceable.
days, okay. I also, just so the people don't keep wanting it quicker than you're able to do it. The other piece is just the basketball courts, a comment on that. Thank you for bringing that up. I remember the conversations. We tend to get requests for parks sort of one park at a time, or one issue in a park and another issue, and we jump around. Well, not me personally, really the staff. But I do have to say that you guys did a great job in saying, why not do all 3 basketball courts at the same time, get one bid. And I just want to remind the public, for those that are following, that started from the staff and then went from there to say that's a more intelligent way of doing it. And there was a lot of conversation about, can we get the basketball courts fixed up, because there are a lot of people that want to use them, and it's sort of their turn in the list of baseball and soccer and all the other stuff that we do.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you and Bill are coordinating that.
That's one thing in response to that. I think Bill is trying to find an appropriate, responsible balance between what economy of scale he's going to get,
Right.
and what they can actually get done in one summer with that same contracting group.
Right.
I think he's going to try for at least one, but he might try for the second court, and I think he might be putting bets off to the following year, because I think he has a little more elaborate plans than just a refurbishment of what exists now in the footprint. And only because I keep talking about Bill, I do want to recognize that, and he wanted to mention that historically, the refurbishment and the getting ready for the season of the Nelson tennis courts has always been contracted out, but this year I believe he undertook it in-house with in-house labor, and he saved, I think he said, approximately $5,000 by doing that, and he said it's turned out better than ever. So that's
Really?
something
Wow.
to look forward to going forward. So kudos to his guys.
Okay. Great.
Thank you. Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Paul discussed many of the resolutions tonight. Trustee Herrera alluded to Resolution J, which relates to some of the legislation currently pending in Albany with regard to revisions to for this area, the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, as well as sections of the New York City Administrative Code, and we can discuss that a little further on. There's Resolution K, which relates to something we discussed last week at work session, the E4All, or the formal name Entrepreneurship for All, and the program that it is hoped would come to the Village of Ossining. There's also a Resolution A under New Business, which is for some appointments to the Civilian Police Complaint Review Board from the police side with regard to that. Just a couple of other things. There is a planning board meeting, as I mentioned earlier, on the 28th of May. It looks to be one of the longer, if not longest, agendas since I've been here on this. And if people are interested, there will be an interesting group of projects before us. In addition to Hudson Step, Sing Sing Prison Museum will be there. The Atria has an application before them, as well as a couple of others that will be there. So if anyone is interested in hearing about what's going on in different areas of the village in terms of planning, that would be the time to do it. And I should let people know the agenda is not up online yet, but when it's online, which will be during the week of the 20th, we have links to all of the documents there with regard to all of the projects. So if anyone is interested in a particular project that's there, they can certainly click on that. I do just want to let the board know that I have been exchanging correspondence with Rose Noonan with regard to a consultant contract, and I think we have pretty much everything worked out. And that's with regard to the RFQ for the DPW site. So hopefully we can have that signed in a couple of days. Rose provided me today with the particular dates that she wants in terms of completion, and that's something that we can all go over. But at least that's there, and we've moved along in that particular direction. We do have just one resolution briefly, which is Resolution G, again discussed last week, and that involves the extension of the lease agreement with Ossining Steamer for a 3-year period. Thank you.
Police Chief Kevin Sylvester.
Good evening. On October 1st, 1962, President Kennedy signed into law a bill designating May 15th, today, as Peace Officer Memorial Day. So you may have noticed that the flags around town today are at half-staff, and that is in memory of Police Officer Gerald Birdsall and James Fagan, for whom this building is named, 2 officers from the village of Ossining who gave the ultimate sacrifice and lost their life in the line of duty. Also, to honor them, we sent Officer Dubray on the police motorcycle, who escorted the Police Unity Tour. It's a group of cyclists that raise money for families of fallen officers. He escorted that group from the Freedom Towers in New York City to Washington, D.C. this year, and participated in all the ceremonies with Police Week, which is a first for our department, so we're really excited to have that experience with him coming back. Busy month for training for us. We've got people away at Marine training, getting ready for the boating season. We just completed our annual recertification for CPR. We have several officers out at Field Training Officer School in preparation for potential new hiring going on soon. We have officers at Firearms Instructor School and Armorer School, so we are all about training this month. For social media, we're going to continue at Facebook, Instagram, both of our Twitters, Nextdoor and Nixle. We have now expanded to Snapchat. So for those of you, it's aimed at a younger crowd, particularly in the 17 to 25 demographic, who don't necessarily follow the other platforms. And that particular program is going to follow Officer Ryan Tompkins on the midnight tours, which is something that most people don't usually get a lot of visibility for. For our summer series, we've teased and will officially announce next week our block parties. There's going to be a series of 4 block parties this summer. We'll give out the official dates for those and the locations next week when we make another announcement with my good friend Dr. Sanchez. Coming up on Monday Monday the 27th, before I'm back before legislative session, I just want to remind everybody that Memorial Day is coming, and with that will come the Memorial Day Parade, which will begin at 9 a.m. on Croton Avenue. So we'll put some notifications out about that for traffic and such. Last, we're continuing to prepare for our accreditation assessment. We are now just about 30 days out, so June 18, 19, and 20, we'll have New York State assessors on site checking to make sure that we are up to speed on all of our requirements here. Between now and then, my support services division asks that nobody bothers them or asks them for anything, because they are deep in the process. That's all for us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Organization announcements. Village board resolutions. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board on any of the resolutions this evening?
Hi, good evening, Mayor Garrity, Board of Trustees, and everyone else. My name is Sheila Vereen Massengale, and I am a resident of Ossining, member of of Bethlehem Baptist Church, and member of Community Voices Heard here in Ossining. I'd just like to state that I support Resolution J on the agenda, which is the resolution of the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees supporting universal tenant rights and rent stabilization. Being a long-term supporter of ETPA, I feel that this resolution would be in favor of all the tenants and residents of Ossining in the expiration of ETPA. And that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll move into our board resolution. Oh,
Nope. Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome.
board
You may come forward,
resolutions.
Yet Omar can talk for 20 minutes. Where's the equality here? Okay, you can start me, Kevin. Resolution I think. I thank the village on being transparent that we're paying someone $6,000 in a settlement, legal settlement. And you also provided the name of the claimant, the amount being paid. I appreciate that. Interesting that when I sued the village for false arrest and more, due to the parking enforcement officer, Renee Mosquita, resolution write-up did not include my name nor the amount I was awarded. There's a gag order. I can't tell anybody, but the picture of the check is hanging in my living room. Right above my 50-cent refund for a broken parking meter. Letter J, tenants' rights. I own a 2-family home, so I'm a landlord or landlady. And I too should have rights. I rented to someone who paid me $1,000 security and no rent for 4.5 months thereafter. I had to take her to court. I was awarded over $4,000 by Judge Reisman, and this tenant had been evicted from numerous prior apartments for non-payment of rent and owes almost $1,000 in local parking tickets. But that's a whole nother story. You know I follow parking tickets. No one here, no one in this room knows it like I do. To all landlords, and I can back everything I have in writing. I think everybody knows me well enough with documents. Watch out for Tracy McFarland, age 37, who extensively damaged my property and was a filthy, disgusting slob. Oh, I paid for an eviction lawyer and our local court without anybody filling out one of these pieces of paper to get a free lawyer. She got a free lawyer. I had to pay for a lawyer. I'm a landlord. Slobby, non-paying tenants get a free lawyer. I think that's terrible. The worst of it all was McFarland used a space heater, and everyone up there and everybody over here and chief of police know how scared I was for 2 months. Space heater was right next to my fabric curtains in my rental apartment that's fully furnished by me. No one on this board, no one, and not the building department, the fire department, the police chief, or the police department came to my rescue. You could have found some kind of damn loophole somewhere to get rid of this space heater, but nobody did. 2 months, I lived in fear of my life. I didn't sleep for 2 months. Excuse me the way I say this, to hell with all of you. Here I was, a tax-paying resident, and no one helped me for 2 months. May all of you go through the misery I went through for 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to comment on resolutions this evening?
That's under new.
Oh, it's under new
Considered a resolution?
business.
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not worried about if I like it or not. We're trying to think about procedure. I suppose that is a resolution, even though it's in a different section. Really?
Put on that clock, that kid. Letter IX, what's that, 9, number 9? The Civilian Complaint Board appointments. First, the form being used should include the word compliment form. Many people wish to compliment some of the officers, police personnel. But it says complaint form. That's so damn negative. Make it complaint or compliment form. I've said this for years. Because these employees do get compliments. Also, my personal opinion, an opinion, I don't have document to back it, is that Lieutenant Damiano, Sergeant Donahue, Officer Perillo, and McGovern. Wasn't McGovern the chicken cop? He's wonderful. Those are superb choices for the civilian complaint and compliment board. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on any of the resolutions, including the one that's now in new business? Welcome.
Evening, Mayor Ossining and members of the board. Thank you for letting me be here one more time. I've been here several times. And I just have a question for you. What is the resolution for the tenants, a tenants resolution? I'm here representing a voice of many. I went through so much. I lost my dad recently. It was so much negligence, I believe, the landlord. I have my parents living with me because they need care. I was promised, I was put on waiting list for 2-bedroom apartment. First floor because they have health issues. I have health issues as well. 4 years. They moved me back from the 3rd or 4th place. I mean, I was on the first place on the waiting list. They moved me back to the 3rd or 4th place. My dad his health continued getting worse. I've been asking and begging to move me. If I had to pay, I would pay. But they increased my rent in 1-bedroom apartment. 3 people living there. And it was no resolution. I tried to reach out to the Department of Major. I was trying to reach out to you, and it was impossible. I tried to get some help to see how the tenants can get help in this, because I'm not only one. I'm not the only one. I just represent the voice of many who increase maybe the size of the family. Maybe it's a new member of the family, new baby, and they had to be evicted because of that. In my case, it was very difficult to deal with. I'm still on waiting list. I'm still with my mom on the 2nd floor waiting for a resolution. I just ask you, what is the status? What you can do for the tenants?
Are you a Section 8 voucher holder?
No, I'm a affordable housing.
You're part of the Village Affordable Housing Program?
Yes.
I think this is something that we should probably continue conversation offline. Could you leave your name and number with the clerk for us to talk to you afterwards, see if there's something that the village can do to be helpful? Yeah. Are there others who would like to comment on resolutions this evening? We have a couple of people in the audience who are here to talk with us. When we get to one of our later resolutions, the E for All, I'm just going to ask them to hold, and we'll have a conversation because we discussed it without them being present last week, so we can have any discussion at that time. So that's why Abby keeps raising her hand and I keep telling her to sit down. So all right. Are there others who would like to comment on resolutions? If not, then we'll move forward with Resolution A.
Okay, so Resolution A, approval of minutes May 1st, 2019, resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the May 1st, 2019 regular meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Letter B, approval of voucher detail dated May 15, 2019, resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the voucher detail report dated May 15, 2019 in the amount of $480,748.67. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution C, resolution amending the village's procurement policy to add and authorize the village to join the Hudson-Galveston Area Council's HGAC Cooperative Purchasing Program. Whereas on January 2nd, 2019, the Village Board of Trustees adopted the procurement policy, which policy is intended to apply to all goods and services which are not required by law to be publicly bid. And whereas Section 1 of the procurement policy provides in part that other than for certain exceptions allowed by statute, purchases are not required to be competitively bid if purchased under New York State and New York State County or local government contracts or through a purchasing consortium provided by the contract is awarded in a manner that constitutes competitive bidding consistent with New York State law and made available for use by other governmental entities and subject to the approval of village manager and corporation council. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Ossining's procurement policy approved on January 2nd, 2019 is amended to add Houston-Galveston Area Council's HGAC Cooperative Purchasing Program as an authorized source to purchase vehicles, apparatus, materials, equipment, or supplies, or to contract for services related to the installment and maintenance or repair of apparatus, materials, equipment, supplies, and or for other services offered through the purchasing consortium. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees authorizes the acting village manager to sign the interlocal contract for cooperative purchasing membership agreement for HGAC Cooperative Purchasing Program subject to review and approval by the Corporation Council. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
May I add comment?
Yes, please.
Excuse me, Mayor, thank you. One thing I didn't mention when I was discussing that resolution earlier that Tom wanted me to mention was that this is specifically being adopted for the Pierce fire apparatus for hollow hose. However, that same apparatus was also available on the Sourcewell consortium, which you have adopted last year, and we use that often. However, this consortium had that same apparatus for $7,000 less, plus or minus.
Oh.
So I believe the fire department went out and found that and brought it to Tom's attention and asked that he adopt this one for the savings.
Well, certainly worth $7,000 to pass this resolution then.
More or less, yeah. It's one way of putting it. And there's also a lot of material on here that we might get that same benefit. Just we'll know when we actually have to look for something.
Okay, great.
Nice.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Letter D, resolution authorizing the acting village manager to sign the proposal with Lynstaar Engineering PC for design and engineering services for an emergency generator and automatic transfer switch at Hollow Hose Company. Resolved that the acting village manager is authorized to sign the proposal from Lynstaar Engineering PC 12 Water Street, White Plains, New York, for engineering professional services related to the installation of an emergency generator and automatic transfer switch at the Whole Hose Company, such services as detailed in the December 3rd, 2018 proposal. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Finance budget modification to provide funding for engineering services. Resolved, the 2019 general fund budget is modified to transfer appropriations from the contingency account for engineering installation design costs associated with planned purchase and installation of a generator at Hollow Hose Company estimated at $15,000 as follows. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? I'll just acknowledge this is the dollar amount associated with item D, and we've had lengthy discussions about this item in work session if anybody wants to go back and review that. Chiefs all joined us last week for us to further discuss this and look forward to the engineering design being done this year and see what happens going forward. Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Letter F, Resolution Amending Management Benefit Plan. Whereas the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees and its annual reorganization meeting on January 2nd, 2019 approved the management benefit plan providing certain employment benefits for elected officials, managers, and appointed personnel, and resolved that the management benefit plan adopted on January 2nd, 2019 is amended by deleting the title of technical support specialist, and be it further resolved that the management benefit plan adopted on January 2nd, 2019 is amended and adding the title of communication service coordinator, and be it further resolved that the amendment to the management benefit plan in effect upon certification of this resolution by the village clerk. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Letter G, resolution authorizing the acting village manager to sign a lease agreement with Ossining Steamer Company, Inc. Resolved that the acting village manager is authorized to sign a lease agreement with Ossining Steamer Company, Inc. for a 3-year term from April 1st, 2019 through March 31st, 2022 with annual rent payments as follows. April 1st, 2019 through March 31st, 2020, $16,611.25. April 1st, 2020 through March 31st, 2021, $16,943.48. April 1st, 2021 through March 31st, 2022, $17,282.35. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? DPW bid award materials, supplies, and services for the period of June 1st, 2019 through May 31st, 2021. Whereas New York State law provides for municipality to advertise and award bids for certain materials, supplies, and services as specified therein through the use of an annual bid process which allows for a particular purchase of such items at a fixed cost to the municipality. And resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby awards bids and materials, supplies, and services in accordance with the attached recommendations from the Department of Public Works, which recommendations are circled, and be it further resolved that the aforementioned award for materials, supplies, and services effective June 1st, 2019 through May 31st, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Letter I, resolution authorizing settlement, Matthew Eisman versus the Village of Ossining. Whereas Matthew Eisman, residing at 200 High Point Drive, Hartsdale, New York, on December 17, 2018, filed a summons and complaint in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of Westchester, titled Matthew Eisman versus the Village of Ossining. And resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining authorizes settlement in the matter of Matthew Eisman versus the Village of Ossining, 70566-2018 in the amount of $6,000, and be it further resolved that the Treasurer of the Village of Ossining is hereby authorized and directed to pay Matthew Eisman and or his representatives $6,000 in full settlement of the aforementioned matter upon delivery to the Village of Ossining of a release to the Village of for settlement of the claim. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Letter J, resolution of the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees supporting universal tenant rights and rent stabilization. Whereas the Village of Ossining has documented and identified an unmet need for affordable housing opportunity to serve low and moderate income residents. And whereas the New York State Emergency Tenant Protection Act, ETPA of 1974, provides rental protections, including rent stabilization, whereby landlords are subject to regulated rent increases and tenants have the right to renewal leases. And whereas in 2019, the New York State ETPA of 1974 will be expiring, presenting an opportunity for our leadership in Albany to improve and extend the tenants' rights moving forward. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village of Ossining calls upon our leaders in Albany to strike the geographic restrictions from the ETPA by supporting S 5040-A 7046. so that local governments can take an active role addressing the costs of rental housing and provide critical rental rights across the state. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining supports and endorses S 2892/A5030, which would enact good cause eviction legislation, which would protect tenants from evictions without good cause, and which would bring the right to maintain tenant status with limited rent increases to all renters in non-owner occupied buildings in the state. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining supports and endorses S 2845-A4349, which would prohibit owners from adjusting the amount of preferential rent upon the renewal of a lease. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining supports and endorses S 2591-A1198, which would prohibit owners from being able to take apartments out of rent regulation when the existing tenant leaves. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining supports and endorses S 3693-A6322, which would prohibit owners from being able to increase the rent based on repairs that serve as a pretext for permanent rent hikes, and seeks to abolish their allowance. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining supports and endorses S 185-A2351, which relates to rent increases after vacancy of a housing accommodation and would eliminate the vacancy bonus. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining supports and endorses S 3770, which relates to rent increases after vacancy of housing accommodation under the pretext of individual apartment improvements, and seeks to abolish this allowance. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining supports and endorses S 4169-A5251, which extend the time for tenants to seek recovery from the overcharge of or compensation for illegal landlord activity from 4 years to 6 years. And be it further resolved that the Village of Ossining supports and endorses S 299-A167, which would bring rent control increases in line with the standard rent guideline board increases. And be it further resolved that the village clerk is directed to send a copy of this resolution to United States Senator Kristen Gillibrand, United States Senator Charles Schumer, Governor Andrew Cuomo, State Senator David Carlucci, State Assembly Members Sandy Galev, and Village of Ossining Mayor Victoria Garrity. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board?
I do. All turn to me. I guess me first.
Well, you asked for it to be on the agenda.
Right.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So, I asked this to be put on the agenda a couple of weeks ago, but my board members, as they should, requested some more time to kind of really do some research on the legislation being proposed by the Democratic caucus in Albany, both in the Assembly and the Senate. Just wrote a statement just to make sure that okay. Only until recently, the past couple of years, the Village of Ossining, the County of Westchester, and the State of New York have determined and proven that we have a very serious housing emergency in our communities, even right here in Ossining. I believe that housing is a human right and that people should not live in fear of eviction, and that the task and opportunity to strengthen the rights of all renters is critical to make our community succeed, to make our neighborhoods stronger, and has a direct correlation of success when it comes to education and health outcomes and the overall stability of this village, of the county, and the state. The Housing for All campaign, which is better known as the 9-bill package that you just heard our clerk read, is a proposed resolution supporting and fighting for a legislative agenda that would stabilize neighborhoods and eliminate the control that corporate landlords have over housing in New York State, assuring that every tenant in New York, no matter where you live, has the same protections and that they deserve the same protections, whether you're in that area or not. Ossining was and still remains the focal point of this campaign and issue because of our 4-year ETPA battle, which included the tabling of a vote, a second vacancy study, many public hearings, its ultimate historic passage on September 5th, 2019, the biggest amount of rent-stabilized units added in decades, followed by a repeal effort that was successful in February 2019, which stripped the protections given to people earlier that year. My colleagues, Mayor Garrity and Trustees Levin and Casada, who voted against ETPA, were very vocal, as is their right as a resident and as a board member, about the opposition and opposed to the overall program, and criticized the program for what, according to them, was a subsidy program and only helped some and not all, and for many other reasons that they could clear up later, and they have already on record, they chose not to support the program. I thought that because it was known for a while that the first time in decades rent regulations would expire in New York, not only in Ossining, but the entire state, 30 days from today, that they would join their colleagues, their neighboring elected officials, housing experts and advocates, their partners in New York State Assembly and Senate, to make their concerns known, to heard and finally have a chance to expand and strengthen rent regulations and protections for all in Ossining and New York State. To my knowledge, unfortunately, we haven't been part of that conversation yet. We were the main vocal ones statewide the past 4 years, mainly this past year. With that being said, I took it amongst myself and I asked my colleague, Trustee Quantel Bazemore, if we can be one of the many communities who have passed the resolution, which is basically a symbolic statement supporting what they're calling the most progressive tenant protection bill package in decades in Albany. And to have us have a discussion and have the village, at least at the end of the fight for this particular policy, as to where we are with ETPA. And despite the fact that we don't really know how the repeal works or what the infrastructure in the village is for that, that we will have the opportunity to be a leader and send it to Albany and let them know that despite the contention and the rhetoric that you heard from us the past 4 years, we do believe in the expansion of tenant rights and rent stabilized apartments. And because we have said on this dais that we wish that there could be legislation that's for all and not for some, this is no better opportunity than to just do that. So I really do thank Democratic Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Governor Andrew Cuomo, David Carlucci, and many other members of the Assembly and Senate for putting together this package. I was very glad to be there yesterday. Over 2,000 people, a lot from Westchester and from Hudson Valley, really advocating, a lot of electeds. And at this point, only if the opportunity is wanted to be taken by my colleagues, we could have a discussion. But I think it would be a great opportunity to send a symbolic statement. This resolution does not, commit us or bind us to anything. We have done a lot of resolutions that really kind of support the idea of what's going on, and that's, to me, very important. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to comment on this resolution before we vote?
Couldn't echo Trustee Herrera's sentiments better. Just want to really talk about the good cause eviction. Oftentimes, a lot of our residents come just in general when we talk about rent hikes. Even in some of our luxury apartments, you can actually see rent hikes as high as 10% each month for 12 months. So I think the good cause eviction is one of the pieces of the legislation that really applies to every single tenant that is that does not live in an owner-occupied residence of 4 or less units. This is something that can be extended to all tenants. And again, as Trustee Herrera had mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of conversation of how antiquated the law is. I think that these 9 pieces have been presented from the Assembly to the state senators, because all this stuff is founded in the experience of tenants. The vacancy decontrol, landlords being able to just go up on the rent 20% just because an apartment is vacant, really reconstructing the MCI, the major capital improvements. This is something that will continue. The presentation that you see today will be worked on in the Senate. But again, I think it's important that we send a strong message because a very contentious conversation over the last 3 to 4 years, and here's our opportunity where Ossining can say, hey, we may have a difference of opinion, but we can at least support really working this piece of policy out that has managed to keep long-term residents in their communities. And clearly, from the people who have showed up here to Ossining, there were a lot of people from Kingston, there were people from Ossining, there were people from Westchester, but a lot of people came here even on September 5th, and even during the repeal, because this is something that resonates with people that are far outside the geographical lines of the village. The experience of tenants in New York City, the experience of tenants here in Ossining, the experience of tenants in Kingston, the experience of tenants in Buffalo, is the same when you don't have those rental protections. So I think if we are true to our values or what we claim to be, we claim here in our community that we value diversity and that diversity is our strength. That is something that you always hear elected officials say here in Austin. Then we at least should be able to support such initiative that actually protects diversity, and I can explicitly mean particularly people of color and people who all people, but particularly people of color, and as noted in our housing needs assessment that we stated that we paid dearly for. That's my comments.
Would anybody else like to comment before we vote?
Manny, you going to? Okay. So I'll just make a comment. I think it's we have discussed this for 4 years. For 2 years of, I'm not going to rerun everything I've said. The state should be looking at affordable housing in the state of New York. The bundled 9 bills to me, which I read, and links were sent with these, which I read for hours because I did want to. I wrote to, I think, my colleagues, to all of you, and I did because I wanted to learn. So lots of what we talked about is on record. So everything we said in our beliefs, contentious, not contentious, have all been dissected and argued, etc. But the problem with the 9 bills that are being presented is, for me, as a representative of this community, is that everything that I had brought up has been totally ignored. And by the way, I did speak to 2 of the people on here. The income inequity and how this is developed, boards that I believe are not effective, and having more of them doesn't make it more effective. The issue of cities versus towns and villages in the state of New York. If you travel through this state, there are lots and lots of towns and villages, including us. We're a village. The laws that were provided before 1974 for New York City were done as a solution to a major economic and socioeconomic problem in the city of New York. I personally think that while somebody should have been looking through all these bills to differentiate what helps cities that have infrastructures, corporate taxation, and an entire different system that would make sense, in my opinion, and I'm stating my opinion, not the opinion of the board, were not addressed as far as I could read. And let me tell you, not easy documents for the average individual to read, understand, and find, even though both Quantel and Omar sent the links. Not easy. Not easy to reach our staff in our agencies, and not easy to reach public officials to ask questions, which Omar had suggested I do. Although 2 returned and had a conversation with me, in all fairness to them. So it doesn't really answer so many of the things that I have brought up, along with some of my colleagues for the past 2 years. And so how can I support something that I couldn't support in the past 2 years? I wouldn't want this in my village because I believe that ETPA is a dinosaur legislation. There has been not 30 days. When this was established, it was established with a sunset date. Every politician knows exactly when this was supposed to sunset. Everybody had 4 decades to look at these laws and regulations. I would have settled, frankly, for 14 months of actually looking at this. So that is one of my problems for me. The actual other problem is that by bundling 9 bills by somebody from the Bronx, and while I understand the political value and it looks terrific, honestly, when you bundle and you give people like me the opportunity to vote, even if it's a gesture, on something that is bundled, I may like one of these things, but I can't vote on one of them because I don't like the other 8. So the way it's presented, for me, is not even a viable solution. I mean, I don't know what other politicians in the state of New York do. That's for them. They were elected by people in the state of New York, myself included, and I hope that they do look at it seriously. Hope that they look at the videos and the conversations that were had here. I hope one of them calls me and asks why I did what I did as an elected official. But frankly, they don't have to. I made my decision based on knowledge that I have. They're going to make the decision based on the knowledge and the staff that they have. So I couldn't support this 2 years ago. I couldn't support this a few months ago, and I can't support this now.
Please.
Thank you. I want to add a couple of those. I wasn't going to say anything, but did a lot of, I did a lot of reading, a lot of research on my own. I had the opportunity actually to talk with my colleague for about 3 hours, 2.5 hours.
Oh, 3 hours.
About 2.5 hours. Is really it. In
Long
regards to some of the issues that I had, and I'm going to echo some of the points that Rika mentioned. Is a lot of these laws were based on New York City needs. One of the difficult parts that I still cannot wrap my head around is when you expand something without having a balance, what you're trying to accomplish, lose that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because now they expand into 4 units and less. And there's a provision in there that those particular units will not be affected if you own or occupy. That affects a lot of small landlords. And when I say small landlords, meaning like maybe have two families somewhere, our municipality or through the state. And that to me is not fixing something, is just expanding advantage without trying to accomplish what they should be accomplished. So to me, it's a balance, or it's a balance of how we do things. And I believe they did not have accomplished that. All this time, some of the politicians around New York State is just couldn't accomplish that. For that alone, I cannot support something like this going forward.
Anybody else?
I wanted to clarify something, but if you wanted to make your
Go ahead.
remarks. So one thing, I think my colleagues spending the time last 2 weeks to look over it and share how they feel. I just wanted to clear up one thing that I think this board, not including myself, has done, at least for Ossining, which I have to clarify each time I hear it. ETPA, or if you want to call it the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, or if you want to call it rent regulation in New York State, is not, I repeat, not an affordable housing program. It is not supposed to create affordable housing. It is not supposed to manage affordable housing. It's not supposed to, it has nothing to do with affordable housing. It's a tenant retention program. And these bills go around that. With this particular program, because I've heard it so much here that when I actually talk to people in Ossining, they go, but Omar, affordable housing, I go, it's nothing to do with affordable housing. Like nada, zero. It's not an affordable housing program. It doesn't create it. It doesn't stop it. Doesn't, so I just want to put that on the record. That's fact. That's not my opinion, by the way. I just think it's very important, regardless of whatever it's being voted on, to just know the difference of what the program is and what it's not. To Trustee Casada's point, a lot of these are what I would call more New York City based. The first one, so the expansion of ETPA, the governor and DHCR, thanks to the help of the Senate and the Assembly a couple of months ago, made a pledge and actually voted on expanding the staff by almost 50%. That's almost 80 hires from what I read. I don't have the actual numbers. We can get them for us. But that's the biggest staff hire to manage the further implementation and expansion of a program, especially with us having an office in White Plains. So a lot has been done. I think that the difference of how we go about as legislators, it's different, right? So, despite this resolution being on the agenda tonight, no other discussion has been had about how as a board we were going to be sending our changes or our ideas or our concerns. That's why I was kind of forced to put, to put this on, because I figured it would force the conversation. We don't even know how the repeal effort works, right? Stuart, with all due respect, sent all my questions, basically the majority of them, back to the board. So I'm glad it triggered more of the questions that were never answered, despite us passing legislation. But when it comes to this particular matter, just because certain of you chose not to, with the exception of Rika, I actually appreciated that you actually spent the time to call and get some answers. We need to, if we're having that hard of an issue reaching our state departments and agencies, we need to seriously bring in our state reps here or at a meeting and saying, hey, listen, we're elected, we have responsibilities. Your office and your agencies are not acting appropriately, and we're trying to do this. That still hasn't been done. I mean, I put some pressure on Sandy and David myself, but these are the conversations that have to be had when it comes to whether or not you support a program or are going to continue supporting it or altering it. And that goes for anything that we do going forward.
Any further? Okay. I'll just make a few comments and clarifications, and then we can go ahead and vote. This is, as was acknowledged, this is a symbolic resolution, which we pass from time to time. We've passed symbolic resolutions affirming our community values on various issues. We've passed symbolic resolutions a few years back, I believe it was 2016, supporting driver's licenses to be eligible for all New York drivers, regardless of documentation status. And we're still talking about that and hoping and advocating for that. And so it's important that local governments are paying attention to what's going on in the state and how that might impact us here locally. In this case, I don't think this is going to pass, but I think we knew that. But it is another opportunity to have a conversation about ETPA and about housing. And I do want to clarify a couple of things. There are more ETPA units in the village of Ossining than in any village or town in Westchester County. And I also want to clarify, we did not pass any legislation related to ETPA. What we passed were resolutions enabling New York State legislation, the ETPA program. My understanding is that while there are nine pieces of legislation, nine pieces of legislation here related to tenants' protections, they are still certainly in flux. There may be modifications. Some may be passed, some may not be passed. Some have more support than others in one house or the other, and so we'll just see what happens in Albany. I do commend New York State for attempting to try and look more holistically and update the tenant protections that they have in place. Unfortunately, I think they fall woefully short. The sponsor of the bill, which would expand ETPA to be potentially enabled throughout New York State, mentions that what they're doing is removing arbitrary geographic restrictions. Unfortunately, they have not been able to remove the arbitrary restrictions related to what buildings are protected and what buildings are not protected. And they have also not tied any of the protections to people who are in a financial need, which is very different. There are a couple of the proposals that would particularly potentially impact buildings here in Ossining or anywhere, but my concern is primarily the ones here in Ossining. And one of them is that major capital improvements will no longer be able to be factored into rent increases. And the reason why this is such a great concern is because one of the concerns that has been raised about ETPA is that the buildings, the question is asked, will they be well maintained or not? And one of the arguments that proponents of ETPA have said is that absolutely they will be well maintained. And in fact, there's an incentive for landlords to maintain them well, because then they can increase their rent to recoup the cost of doing those major capital improvements. And that's no longer going to be an option. So that is certainly a concern, as well as landlords who have a tenant. And we may see this more in Ossining than other communities, because most communities that have ETPA have had it in place now for 20 years or so. And it's always anecdotal. But if a landlord has a tenant that, having a tenant that is a good tenant that you like having, people will hold back on increasing rents and perhaps have artificially deflated rents for one unit or a couple of units. And they anticipate when that person moves out or moves on, that they will raise the rent significantly to be more in keeping with the rest of the building, but that will no longer. And ETPA has a provision that when a tenant changes, there could be a significant increase of 20% in that. Is being proposed to be eliminated. So there are a couple of detailed concerns about this. Plus, I continue to have some of my concerns that there are more downsides than I would like to this very well-intentioned legislation, which is to protect tenants and preserve affordability of housing in all of the communities where it might be eligible. So. With that,
I just want to comment, because you did mention the MCI, and I knew, based on the way that it was presented to you guys, that I knew that was going to be a stickler for you. So I want to speak to the spirit of the MCI. Historically speaking, when there have been major capital improvements, when this law was first initiated, they would take whatever the cost was, they would divide it by 84, and then whatever that portion was, that would be tacked on to the rent. What people are actually asking is that in the process of looking at MCIs, is that it's one thing to make a capital improvement. In the regular world, you think once you make a capital improvement, you make it because you have to make it. Like the boiler gets done, do it because it needs to be done. The roof gets done, do it because the roof needs to get done. If you sit around and you renovate the whole building, you do it because it needs to get done. The experience with MCIs is that oftentimes landlords would do major capital improvements before the life of the good was, before you need to replace something. So when they're talking about prohibiting MCIs or major capital improvements, it's really looking at a way to regulate how a person does major capital improvements, and so to regulate how they would do that, and also so that when you give these increases, that they won't be permanent. So if you go and you do the boiler, and the boiler lasts, say, 20 years, after 20 years, that permanent rent hike is not there. So there's been some issues and some loopholes that landlords have been using, particularly in New York City, which has all these this experience. That's why they're actually looking at making sure that DHCR has a little more. They're maintaining and they're looking at those provisions, so that you just won't have people making improvements just to make improvements, and then the rent goes up, and the next thing you know, someone's doing replacing brick. Like that was one of the things that they talked about. Landlords would replace brick. They would get the finest brick in the whole wide world. It would be expensive, and they would do it, every 7 or 8 years. But again, that rent, that whatever that cost was, would be attached to the rent. One of the things that was also mentioned is sometimes landlords would make improvements, their brothers would do the improvements, but then when you would look at the actual cost of the improvements, it was far above market rate. So those are things that they're looking at. It's not just to prohibit the cost. It's not just to say, hey, someone can't invest in their buildings. But again, when you're in a capitalistic society and people are hell bent on just, getting as much profit as possible, they will use these loopholes to basically ensure that tenants can't remain in their. So I will send you, just for me, so that I will send you an article that can definitely explain what I tried to articulate.
Oh, I look forward to the article.
It's interesting that you point out. I think that is the intention, but when you read how it's written and how it's articulated in the actual bill, that's actually not how it's done. I mean, I got the first part, and you did a great job actually explaining it. I mean, I understand your examples, and there are others, but actually the way it's written doesn't really solve for that. to be honest with you. And that actually is an issue with how these things are written. I get some of the intentions and then the way they're written really isn't the outcome that's going to happen here.
Okay, so, Madam Clerk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Resolution K, resolution expressing the Village of Ossining support for entrepreneurship for all Inc. E for all. Whereas on December 19, 2019, the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees unanimously approved a resolution endorsing the goals and activities of Ossining Innovates to make entrepreneurial skills accessible to the greater Ossining and Westchester communities. And whereas the aforementioned resolution, the Board of Trustees declared its interest and intention to explore the different ways and channels through which the village government will support the Ossining community's efforts to become a center for inclusive entrepreneurship within the county, region, and New York State. And whereas Entrepreneurship for All, a non-for-profit corporation, E for All, organized pursuant to the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, located at 175 Cabot Street, Lowell, Massachusetts, has developed an innovative small business nonprofit accelerator to foster entrepreneurial growth. And whereas Abigail Lewis and Henry Welts have operated Ossining Innovates since its inception with an idea to nurture an entrepreneurial mindset and expand an exclusive form of entrepreneurship activity within the community. And whereas E for All representatives have expressed an interest for expanding E for All's small business nonprofit accelerator program to locations outside of E for All's home state of Massachusetts. And whereas Ossining Innovates representatives had discussed with E for All's representatives placing one New York State location for the small business nonprofit accelerator in the Village of Ossining. And whereas in correspondence dated May 15, 2019, the Hudson Valley Economic Development Corporation expressed its support for E for All by writing, "I am excited to support the work that Abigail Lewis and Henry Welts are doing to find innovative ways to support entrepreneurs in Ossining and surrounding region. Startup businesses are the lifeline for creating career opportunities. They also help to diversify and strengthen our economy. A proven model like Entrepreneurship for All can bring a creative approach to fostering small business growth in Ossining. Support by the Village Board would help jumpstart this program and will show strong support to other funding sources. I strongly urge that the Village Board demonstrate the local commitment, financial support, and leadership by adopting a resolution that would commit the village to meaningful participate in the funding for the first 3 years of operation of an E for All of Ossining, which would be funded only if and when financial commitments, inclusive of the village commitment for the entire operating budget, have been identified. And whereas the Board of Trustees discussed the E for All proposal at a work session on May 8, 2019, and subsequent thereto, board members received responses to their inquiries regarding the program, its financing, the village's commitment, etc., from Abigail Lewis and Henry Welts. And whereas it is anticipated that E for All will provide an English-speaking cohort and one Spanish-speaking cohort and possibly a dual language cohort, and whereas E for All requires an annual commitment of $300,000 per year for 3 years for a total of $900,000, which funds, when raised, will be used by E for All to open location for a small business nonprofit accelerator, hire staff, and then startup cohorts for interested individuals. And whereas the requested commitment from the village would be 10% of the annual commitment of $300,000 or $30,000 per year for 3 years, $90,000, which funds would be contributed on an annual basis, and only after the remaining funds, $270,000, are received by E for All with appropriate documentation provided to the village. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees expresses its support for E for All and for efforts to open an E for All Center in Ossining to develop a small business nonprofit accelerator to foster entrepreneurial growth in Ossining. And be it further resolved that the demonstration of the village's support for E for All efforts to open a center in Ossining to the extent allowed by New York State Constitution, the laws of the State of New York, and the Village of Ossining Code and Charter. The Village of Ossining agrees to contribute 10% of the annual commitment of $300,000 per year for 3 years, totaling $90,000. And be it further resolved that the village's commitment of 10% of the annual commitment of $300,000 for 3 years will be paid only after the remainder of the annual commitment has been received, and should such remainder not be received, the village will have no obligation to make its payment. And be it further resolved that all required funds must be raised no later than 3 years from the date of this resolution. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, so before we vote, I know that the board probably has some questions, and I'd like to invite up the folks who brought this proposal to us. Whomever you are sending up as your representative or representatives this evening. Thank you for coming this evening. We discussed it in your absence last week, and then I know that Corporation Counsel Kahan followed up with a number of questions, and there's been a lot of email back and forth sent, so glad to have us all in a room together again.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for discussing it so completely and thoroughly last week. I just have a very short statement because you're all, I think, quite familiar at this point with the program, and we did, through Corporation Counsel, provide a number of answers to the questions and spoke with a number of you individually. But just, I wanted to reiterate what E4All's mission is. As you know, E4All's mission is to accelerate economic and social impact through entrepreneurship in mid-sized cities and regions like ours. Since 2010, their programs have been revitalizing communities and addressing poverty and unemployment by fueling the dreams and ambitions of entrepreneurs who live in and near these cities, driven by a belief that the residents of these cities, towns, villages know their communities' problems and have the ideas and solutions with the potential to make their communities prosper once again, while creating their own pathways out of poverty or job insecurity and towards independence. There were a couple of questions that I want to just touch on very specifically here, and then I'll answer any other questions that you have. So one of the questions that was raised last week was a question about, or in some ways a statement about a desire that we bring programs to the village that reach our entire population, that really have a broad spectrum. And I think it's really important to notice that for E4All, that their program has really proven that they reach all individuals, especially those who are typically underserved, and that's women, and underemployed individuals, minorities, and immigrants. And they provide them the opportunity to build successful businesses and nonprofits. They serve young adults, seniors, those looking for second, third, fourth careers, so across the entire spectrum. But what's really important is they do that by serving all of them together. And as a community that's committed to celebrating and serving the diversity and inclusion already inherent in our village, and so beautifully served by our school system, we think that E4All is a really strong match for our community. The second thing is around the timing of the funds, and I think that was cleared up in the resolution, but really that the money will only be transferred when we've received the full pledges for the full amount. I think it's also important to notice in response to some of the questions that we will begin to see an immediate impact on our village once this program gets up and running, and that will be seen through the immediate creation of 2 full-time jobs, the staff, and within 6 months of the start of offering the programs, 2 accelerators, and 4 pitch contests will be provided annually, serving about 30 participants through the accelerator and many others through the pitch contests. And these will bring individuals who are downtown who will spend money as they purchase coffee and food, who will help to spread the word about Ossining as a forward-looking village. Another question was raised really related to access, and this is really important.
that in addition to English, that E4All provides program in Spanish. And that's not just translation, that's a full program in Spanish, and they're the first in the country to do that. And then the last thing is there was two more things. There was a conversation around programs like this versus kind of traditional job training programs. And I think one of the things that's really important to notice is that E4All has really bundled a number of things. Frankly, some of the most important things are the only things that studies have been able to show that make a difference in driving economic vibrant communities. That is access to experts. That is access to community to test one's ideas, brainstorm some approaches, and test solutions for new businesses, and support through their community. E4All's 15-week cohort, 12 months of mentorship, and the ongoing thriving ecosystem that they bundle together with their program is powerful. Then the last thing I just want to say was there was some reference to what other kind of support we may have in last week's meeting. And I have for everybody, and you've got some of it already, it's really important to notice that we've really tried to be quite inclusive in looking in the region for support. We introduced Bridget Gibbons, who's the Director of Economic Development for the county, to E4All. She went up to Massachusetts and met with the President and CEO, and subsequently also attended a meeting here in the village with many of you. Through that came to the conclusion that she wanted to support an E4All housed hopefully in Ossining as an important component of the ecosystem that she is building through the county around entrepreneurship. We also have the support of Michael Oates, who's the president and CEO of Hudson Valley Economic Development Corp. I won't read that in because that's already, a big piece of that's already in the resolution. And as well, Richard Wishney provided a letter of support, which I believe everyone on the board has. So I went on a little longer than I intended, but with that, I will stop there.
You're going to stay up there for answers, or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Murdoch, I see that you are here with Abby this evening, with Ms. Lewis this evening. You are one of our local entrepreneurs. Did you want to comment on tonight's proposal?
Hi, Mayor. How are you doing?
Welcome.
Trustees. Yes, I am. Trustees, elected official, Chief Sylvester. It's good to be here, neighbors. My name is Peter Murdoch. Yes, I'm the owner of a local business here. It's called Craven Jamaican Cuisine. And I was fortunate to attend two of the meetings when we host E4All here in the village. And so my takeaway from it was three things. Basically, you know, it enabled entrepreneurs to get good feedback on their ideas, and it helped them to get started. And a lot of people have good ideas and just don't know how to get the help or the resources to help them to get it started. I think this program actually helps with that. It's the second thing, it energizes entrepreneur to be a part of the, entrepreneurship to be a part of the culture of the village of Ossining. I think that, we did the clean Ossining, and I heard you talking about, how vibrant the community is getting because of new businesses coming in. I think that we could be the catalyst for the Westchester community to say we're energizing and we're, offering entrepreneurship, and it's getting started here. So I think it's a great time for this to happen for our surrounding areas, not only Ossining, but our surrounding areas. And lastly, it uses mentor in our surrounding areas to help to develop those entrepreneurs to actualize their dreams. So I think you're using all the resources in your community at the same time, and you're getting people to get started. So, and we all know the impact that small businesses have on hiring and also the economy. So, and I know that for myself. So I just want to say this is why I support this. I don't know, I'm not just here to support them verbally, but I'm also investing in the program also. So just to let everyone know.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
comments?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for coming in. Um, there was some conversation last week. I want to sort of just for the public also frame some things that in retrospect I think we may have overlooked a little bit in that you all have been running meetings for at least 2 years that I know of, because people keep calling me to come, but it must be even longer than that, all over the village, and I think probably the town, but I'm in the village, and in people's living rooms, coffee shops, etc. So this is really coming from a very grassroots place. And I suspect if you could have done it all on your own, you probably were aiming for that, but in your journey found that there's actually a well-oiled machine somewhere else that has already successfully rolled out 6 of these, I will call them initiatives, I'm not sure that's the right word, but we wouldn't be piloting something new, we would actually be the 7th cohort or initiative, the first one possibly in New York State. There might be others, but right now as we're speaking, we will probably be the first, and certainly the first in Westchester. And the first, so I want to just sort of frame for people who may not follow our exciting meetings that we have and might be following this topic as they look at a video, because I think this is exciting. So when I first ran for office, I heard people talk about how we need to do like something for entrepreneurs. We have to do things for downtown. You know, the downtowns all over this country are suffering, and it's not for lack of their local officials trying, but probably because the internet has killed first the malls and then the downtowns, because they've changed the business model. A little bit beyond our abilities, but this isn't beyond our abilities. People who want to be entrepreneurs have the opportunity, but I think it's still true that 80% go out of business within the first year or so in small businesses. And when I did a lot of lending for Chase, those numbers were like plastered on the walls when you had to approve a loan for a small business. And I think the biggest problem was the lawyers, the accountants, the marketing, today it'll be the web. You just can't be an expert in everything. You might be really great with flowers and you want to be a florist, which I think is one of their examples in Massachusetts, or you may want to be able to do some design work for wedding gowns that you specialize in, or embroidery, or a music thing. But by the time you get through all the other stuff that you have to do and incorporate, you're sort of dead in the water. And this, to me, is what lifts you right out of that water. So you could do what you're good at and make your dream happen. From what I understand, the average business in our downtown employs somewhere between 8 and 12 people, full and part-time. So when you do the math, and if you look for success and say maybe 10 businesses open and roll out in a short period of time, that's a lot of local employment for a village of our size. It absolutely has proven its case that it affects dramatically immigrants and women who are minority class, but women and minorities. So that to me speaks volumes, especially for this community as somebody that represents everyone in this community. So I'm excited. You know, I have my concerns. I stated them last week, and I appreciate that we've had conversation about it, as do some of my colleagues. But I did want to just frame, because I'm actually in support of entrepreneurship, and I understand that this isn't actually you're not representing E4All. You found them through this journey that was taking place, and after doing your due diligence, believe on behalf of this village that you want the village to be as supportive, but you are going to get funders. I assume lots of private funders, maybe a foundation or two, but you're working on it. And that as soon as that becomes a reality, we'll then put the village's money forward when all of the rest of that happens. So I'm just trying to, sort of also let people know that this is not a new thing. You've all been working on it for quite a while, and that every single person on this board has been aware to some extent, some more than others, but to some extent of the work that's been done.
Thank you.
Does that cover the bases?
I think you said that beautifully. So
Okay,
thank you
thanks.
very much.
Other questions and comments on the board?
Am I on? I'm on now, right? Okay. Abigail, Henry, thanks for being here. So I've also invested my time to learn about Ossining Innovates, and also more towards the end, where they've been doing all the planning and investment of time and energy and resources to see how to make it a reality here. So thank you. Um, so last week, we kind of, as you saw, we learned about more in depth about what it would actually mean to bring E4All here. We learned that according to the nonprofit and just overall best practices, that if we give up startup money, that'll be easier to raise further money to further your goal. We learned later that it was being supported by other entities. I requested again, and I got it, so thank you, the data sheet of buyer centers, which was very helpful. I kind of wanted it more detailed. I mean, the infographics were helpful and looked great. I just don't know how that relates to because you aren't like other incubators or other programs. I don't know how those figures will be determined here in Ossining, Westchester, New York State. And I guess it's just a concern while I was thinking out loud.
Is it okay for me to say something? So when you say you don't know how they relate to other incubators, so their numbers come from communities that are the ones where they have the 3+ years of runtime, which was the data that you have. Those are from slightly larger communities, but they are communities like ours with the same diversity and immigrant population, so very similar to ours in that respect. So I think, we can feel pretty comfortable that we will have similar results. They do have new programs in the Cape. So not like us, they'll be more diversified. And in Holyoke, and their early results have given them no indication that our results would be any different.
Okay. The other things that we were in receipt of this morning and over the weekend one was a letter from former county legislator Richard Wishney, basically applauding your efforts and endorsing your ask for the village to fund your startup. And we were also in receipt of a letter from Michael Oates of the Hudson Valley Economic Development Corp. And I'm just finding out today, which is good, that you kind of got an endorsement from Bridget Gibbons in the County Executive's Office of Economic Development. My question, those are actually two. I won't say Richard because he's just not part of an entity, but the county and the Hudson Valley Economic Development Corp, those are two pretty powerful entities that already have a lot of connections within the private sector. And what does their endorsement mean? Are they also going to be giving a percentage of your startup cost? Are they going to be giving in-kind services? What does it mean?
Yeah, so one thing just for clarity, I think we should be very careful about using the word startup cost. This is not a business. Neither Henry Welt or myself receive any money or are making any investment here. I think that's really important to understand, and that what we've done thus far is, as you nicely said, has really been a community initiative. Yeah. Nothing more than that. So I think we want to be really careful of using the word startup. The other thing is that one of the things that's very unique about E4All, as opposed to many typical accelerators, is unlike most accelerators that take a percentage of the business, which makes it a non-starter for small businesses, because as you know, the margins on small businesses are so small that if somebody takes a percentage of that business, right, they've basically stolen that individual's business. That's a bit extreme, but done for effect. So I think we really want to be careful of that language. In terms of what they have said that they would do for us, Bridget Gibbons has been out, as many of you have already seen. She started, well, I'll go back for a moment. She started a task force in Westchester back in August. Well, that was sometime, yes, exactly. Focused on building entrepreneurial ecosystem in Westchester. Both Henry Welt and I have been on that task force. She, through that, we introduced her through E4All, as I said. She was impressed enough, she went up to see it. She decided that she wanted to start using, her first incubator would be something that she launched called Element 46, which, as I understand it, just received their first applications. But she has set as her goal, and what she has in the material we provided to you, she stated that she's building a network and that she wants to support an E4All in Ossining, serving the county. She has indicated that there would probably be some financial support, but to be very honest, she is out raising money. She does not have a budget line to do that. So that's the first thing. In terms of, you asked what Michael Oates was doing, who's the president and CEO of Hudson Valley Economic Development Corps. He is actively, so he does not have a budget, which you probably are aware. He does not have, quote unquote, investment funds himself. What he does have is a lot of connections. He's had a conversation with Nita Lowy's office and is busy making an introduction or setting up a meeting. Apparently there's some interest there. And he's making similar kinds of introductions. So he has, and I think he stated it pretty nicely in the letter, that he is committed to helping us find the additional funds so that we can be successful and bring this to Ossining. I guess the last thing I'd just say is we feel, look, we're residents of the village of Ossining. We started this because we care about the village of Ossining and because we really believe in the set of values that not only does entrepreneurship improve individuals' lives and give individuals opportunities, but in fact, an entrepreneur looks at problems as opportunities. And as we think of the kinds of challenges that we have in the village, if we can create an entrepreneurial system, then we have individuals, residents, not just those like yourselves who've been elected, but we have residents who are helping to solve those challenges. Because we believe that so strongly, and because we're residents of Ossining and we believe in Ossining, we really want this anchored here. We do not want an E4All in serving Westchester going to Peekskill or another community. We want it here because what happens is we then have 2 employees who run that local organization. We have people coming, as we said before, who are spending money here. We have people who see Ossining not only talks about the diversity of our community and the need to serve that diversity, but is actively doing things to help that community. So we believe that if you pass this resolution, that it's a really important, not only statement to the public, but it's an anchor that as we go out and raise the rest of the funds, keeps it housed here.
Thank you, Abby. Just to finish on my points, so thank you for clarifying that there is no financial commitment other than possibly us currently that would get you start. I know you don't want to call it a startup cost, but it is a nonprofit.
That's not, you asked me specifically about Michael Oates and Bridget Gibbons.
Right. And
I answered that.
Right. So
that's
if
different than the statement that
if I could just finish that first, I asked you what the role was, whether it's financial or in kind or other. But we learned that it's really more of prospective networking with other possible networks and professionals and investors possibly to help the community nonprofit fundraise the money that it needs. So that's how I understood it. I mean, that's what you said, right? So are we now on the same page here?
I think there was one of the statements that you said just now was that they haven't raised any money, and that's not accurate.
Oh, so I'm sorry. So as of right now, the community nonprofit startup costs for the nonprofit, because it is a nonprofit, and this is the investment funds to bring it here. That's how I'm going to call it, because that's how I see it. And I support nonprofits because they're for the community. Nothing wrong with calling it a nonprofit startup. That's okay. To me, it's okay. I don't see it as a negative thing. I just wanted to know if we were the main entity to prospectively commit this large sum of money as of now. That's all.
So we have private individuals. I mean, you heard one individual just a few moments ago who has pledged us some support, and we have a few others who have pledged support. So no, we have some individuals who have pledged.
Okay. Um, with that said, at the last board meeting, I also brought up, and I actually called her today, the president of the Ossining Chamber of Commerce, partnered with the town of Ossining to submit a CFA application to the state regarding their own version of incubator. And I kind of want to learn about where that went and kind of how to see how their model differs. The only reason why I'm bringing this up is because the main reason why I'm not supporting this resolution of funding is because we don't have a process when it comes to allocating public funding to initiatives or nonprofits, and that is not fair or equitable to anyone. And I cannot allocate taxpayer dollars when most municipalities have a regular process of how to access public funds. And yes, I agree, the E for All mission goes in hand with Ossining values and our economic development, 110%. The way that you are prospectively obtaining your money to me is unfair. And that's why, to clarify, the way that this resolution says of you obtaining $30,000 for the next 3 years, which by the way is also binding future boards, is not the same process or opportunity that other nonprofit organizations that also may have the same type of benefit or inline values or initiatives to the village. So this is not about you. You just happen to be the first person that has triggered me to say this. I've had a big issue with how we allocate public money to just random nonprofits or initiatives that come in, even though they align with what we believe in. Trustee Casada even challenged me, which now I want to do it, to propose an actual policy that's pretty similar to those throughout Westchester about what nonprofits should actually do to request money. But I just don't think it's fair. So I support the program. I want to learn about how I can financially help. But as far as using taxpayer dollars in a system that is not fair to other nonprofits or potential initiatives at this time is not fair or equitable for anyone in Ossining. And I want other nonprofits or potential nonprofits that have the same opportunity that you and others had. At $90,000 a year, I think that's pretty reasonable.
$90,000 over 3 years.
Well, in total, right? And I don't like binding boards unless we're actually able to. So that was a big concern. But my main reason is not against E for All or against Ossining Innovates. It's the way we are allocating public funds is inappropriate and not fair to other nonprofits or initiatives, and that's just fact. After last week, I called a couple of nonprofits and I was like, did you know if you go to a public board meeting, ask them to present a PowerPoint, that you be considered to get money? Because that's the conversation this body had last week was, well, Lamar, anyone can just come to us, and if they talk to us, and we'll open up, and so unfortunately, that's not a process that's actually set in place. Ossining has so many entrepreneurs that are actually what make Ossining today, and that actually have taken the risk to pay the rents and employees and startup costs to have all the businesses that we have, not just in downtown, but throughout the village. And I know that because I served as an employee of the Ossining Chamber and the Hudson Valley for years. So personally and in valued, I am there. But when it comes to equitable access to public funding, that's my main concern. And this is a problem of this body, and they don't see it that way. So it's going to have to be one of my, I guess, things to prove, to show how inequitable and unfair we are distributing public money and having a conversation. So I support the program, just at this point, not using taxpayer money from the village until we have a procedure and a procurement for all nonprofits and initiatives that are in line with our village values and priorities are in set.
So I thank you for your support for E for All and for what we're trying to do. I obviously, you respect whatever opinion you have. I will tell you that with all due respect, as somebody who more than once, and in fact, often is accused of being very process oriented. I think processes are valuable, but but I can also tell you, I believe quite strongly that a process that's used or a lack of a process that's used to block something that is right is unfortunate. So I'm sorry that that you feel the need to use this particular moment in time, both just because I think that impedes progress for the village. And as a resident of the village, besides being the advocate, one of two advocates for this, that's troubling to me. But you know, we'll welcome your private support. Thank you. Definitely happy to talk about that. And I guess the only other thing I'd say is, you know, nobody came to us and quietly asked Henry Welt and Abby Lewis to submit this, or to ask the board for your support, or to ask the board for funds. As you, I think, said earlier, this is two residents care about this village, who knew that as residents that we could come forward and make a proposal, and that we saw that believe in this board in making a decision that's best for the village. So with all due respect, I get the idea of your process, but we didn't have an inside angle here. So I just want to think that it's important to make that clear, because that also has implications on the two of us and how we behave and how we
No, absolutely.
conduct ourselves.
And thank you for
So
that.
thank you very much.
You know, we do still have the opportunity to create a process in which your start would be at the same level playing field as every other nonprofit. So we could literally have a procedure and a process drafted, and we could have it on the work session agenda next week if there's time. We could discuss it, deliberate it. This is not a rocket science. Many procedures already exist, and by the end of the month, we could have you and other nonprofits apply for funding. So it's not blocking this particular moment. It doesn't have to be this moment. I just want to make that clear. You know.
Others with questions and comments?
Yes. First, thank you guys for doing what you guys do. Ossining innovates. I remember, Henry, when you first started, you came to me and you said, "Hey, you know, I need some help getting a couple of people in the room," and we've done that. I've gone to a couple of your programs. I actually enjoyed the last one that I was at, the tail end. The gentleman from the Bronx who involved in healthcare.
Shaheen.
Yes. And I found his story very powerful, very moving, and very inspiring. I just have a couple of questions. We asked for some demographics, and some was provided. So there have been, according to the infographic, there have been 626 jobs created. If just based on me browsing the E4All website, that is about 553 companies. There are $18.9 million revenue. And we know that there have been 57% of the participants have been minority. Looking at the communities that E4All has been in, Lowell and Lawrence, Massachusetts have approximately over nearly 200,000 people. New Bedford and Fall Rivers, again, nearly 200,000 people with 158 jobs. Lowell and Lawrence with 318 companies. Lynn, Massachusetts, they have been there for some time, so they've created 8 companies. Holyoke, which is similar, I may be, hopefully I'm not saying this wrong. Holyoke, which is a somewhat similar size to our municipality, has 8 jobs. Cape Cod, again, 41. And so my question to you is one, out of the revenue, right? Because you talked about the mission being to take people out of poverty. How many participants have actually gone from poverty to not being in poverty out of all the results that have been given so far?
So I have to do something first. So I need to correct a couple of statements.
Okay.
So in terms of the size of the cities, I think it's really important here to recognize that Lowell, Massachusetts, which was their first site, is 100,000. So yes, you are correct. It's quite a bit larger. It's about 4 times our size, but
I was combining Lowell and Lawrence because on
the area they serve is
Yes.
100,000, and the same with the what they call South Coast.
okay.
So what they initially did was they said, we think we want about 100,000. That's the size of the community that we'd like to be serving. So those were their first sites. Then you rightly say that they then went on to Lynn. There were two, similar to Henry Welt and myself, there were two people who saw the need there and started. They're a little bit smaller. I don't have that number in front of me, but I think they're about 75,000. Then the number out in Holyoke, which just is a year old. Actually, I think this is year 1 still for Holyoke. They're about just under 50,000, I believe it is. And then, of course, Cape Cod, which would be like, here, which would serve a region, is quite similar to this size. So they have been moving.
Just for clarification, I don't want to debate the numbers with you. I've only Googled, the population of these municipalities. So if there's any error, that's the reason. Again,
yeah.
understanding that Lowell is one community and Lawrence is another community. And again, that's the reason I use the word about, because it does, use, it serves a certain kind of populous area.
Right. So then the other thing is you talked about the demographics, and I think you pointed out that that's here. So that 73% of their participants are women, 59% were previously unemployed, 50% or 57% are minority owned, and 52% are immigrant owned. In terms of specifics of individuals who've been, can I point to statistics and say X percent is somebody who were in poverty and now, X years later are out of poverty? I do not have that data point. I think we need to consider the fact that, that takes some time to pull out. But what's important is these are individuals who are not only employing themselves, but as you know, given the number of jobs as compared to the number of companies, they're helping employ others.
And so again, when we're speaking about jobs, what kind of jobs are we referencing? Are we talking about minimum wage jobs? Are we talking about, it's one thing oftentimes we get very excited about helping businesses. Oftentimes we get very excited about people being employed. Oftentimes, even when we as a municipality, when we do our pilots and whatever the case may be, we always throw out numbers of so many jobs have been created. But my question is, what kind of jobs, right? So what kind of jobs have been created?
You've approached the, do you want to? So I'm going to answer it this way. Most job programs, right? What do? They help people get to jobs at Walmart, McDonald's, similar kinds of things, right? With all due respect, that's being employed, being productive, whatever that job is something we should all be valuing. The fact that somebody can go and earn a paycheck is incredibly important, whatever that job is. However much they're making is important. What I think is different here, and what's different about being an entrepreneur, is not only are you going and earning some money, but you're taking some control of your own life. You're learning how to make decisions that make a difference in your life. You're learning how to live the values that you have by creating a product, a service, a solution that addresses a problem that you've seen in the community, and at the same time creates value for yourself, gives yourself a job. I'm going to be very honest, I cannot tell you that each of those jobs is a 6-figure job. I cannot tell you precisely how that relates to minimum wage. What I can tell you is that gives individuals feelings of self-confidence, that gives feelings of self-worth, and not only for themselves, but for the rest of their family. And if you've looked at some of the videos, one of the stories that they talk about, and one of the success stories they talk about, is an immigrant woman who she and her husband both lost their jobs at the same time. They went complete unemployment, no income. They had a family to support. What did she do? She started to bake in her home kitchen. She was a great baker. That's great. That meant that she took it to local stores, to the bodegas, They all thought that it was wonderful. They began to sell it. That's all wonderful. But there are other police chiefs and police departments, not just here, who notice that, gee, there's this woman who's got this amazing food that everybody wants to buy, but she's cooking it out of her own kitchen that's not a commercially licensed kitchen. So she had to shut it down. So what did she do? She ended up at E4All. And E4All helped her. She went through the program. Through their connections, not through their own budget, not through their own access to property, they made a connection to somebody at a bank. What did that individual do? Well, as we all know, it's hard to get loans when you're unemployed and you're starting a business and you don't have a big bank account. Because of their relationship, because of the fact that they build relationships in communities, they build networks, they got that banker to find a way to give a loan where she could use the rent that she had for one side of this building that she was going to buy to pay the loan. So they helped give her a loan. She opened up a kitchen. A few years later, she's employing 15 people. She's taking care of herself and her family and her husband. And they are about to buy a second building. Now, obviously, not every story is going to be like that. But boy, that's an amazing story. And I've been having the opportunity, I'll speak for myself, having the opportunity to be behind bringing an organization like that to our community, serving people who live in our own backyards. I think that's amazing. And we're not going to do it all 30 people. You are exactly right. All 30 people are not going to look like that, but they're going to be a few. That's powerful.
And so again, I don't want to, by all means, I don't, E for all, the spirit of E for all is one that I value. The idea that those who are closest to the pain, if I could just rephrase, are closest to the solution. The spirit of E for all, I am in favor of. The questions, though, however, that I still do have is, again, looking at all the communities that they serve, at all their partners. There is only one municipality, right, that is an actual, at least stated on the website, an actual partner. Now, I tried to reach out to the city of Lawrence, right, because they're stated on the website, and to reach out to Alicia Miller today to say, what is the nature of this relationship? I know that the city of Lawrence has their City of Lawrence Vanguard partnership where they donate at least $250,000, and it is a public-private partnership. Last week, we had a conversation about, one, who are we giving the money to? Two, whether or not this can be an in-kind donation, right? Like whether it's providing office space. But three, now the question is the benefit to the overall community of Ossining? So we have 30 participants. How many can actually be from Ossining?
So I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna answer that. I have a feeling I might be pushed out of the way in a moment because Henry looks like he wants to answer something. But I think it's important, just your comment about you could only see one city. We, as you know, E4All is moving to other cities. There are other regions that are raising money, and there are other examples. You know, as they move to different places, each region is doing it slightly differently. So in one case, there was a economic development fund that the government had. Precisely who had that, I can't tell you, but it was a local governmental entity, and they were the ones who actually 100% funded the new site. So it's a mix, and one of the things that they have said is it's very dependent upon the organization. For us, not only do we think that, Ossining can be at the forefront of what we believe will be a movement, but we want it anchored here, so there's a very strategic reason for this. Then your next question, I'm sorry. What was it? Oh, how many people from Ossining? So this, we know this was a question that was asked. So look, it's going to be housed in Ossining. There's going to be immediate economic value to Ossining. Also, Ossining is where we, for the last 2 years, have been actively kind of doing Ossining Innovates and having a conversation. Austining participants, Austining residents, we envision will be probably a significant portion of the first people that will go forward in pitch contests and will go forward with their ideas to be part of the cohort. To be perfectly honest, it is not in the best interest of a successful cohort to strap the selection of the best to a specific number for Austining. So there won't be a specific set aside for, 15 of the 30 participants to be Austining.
So again, one of the reasons that I had talked about the populations of the communities, right, is because generally speaking, a lot of these communities have a lot of people. I mean, some of these communities are 3 times the amount of what is at least reported to the census tract. So when communities are making, even if the city of Lawrence or whoever was, even if there was models where you saw the local community taking the opportunity to make an investment based on the amount of people, one could suggest that everybody is coming from that geographical location. This is something for me that it would seem like the county would be able to really lift up, because this is something where most likely we're going to have different people coming from different areas. For me, what it seems like is that we are dedicating $90,000, $30,000 a year to attract a tenant. And so when you say to me, hey, well, at least we'll have people who will come to Ossining and they'll buy some coffee and they'll buy some tea and they'll understand how Ossining is great, I have to sit up here and say, okay, we have $30,000. Is this the best use of money? And knowingly that we won't actually have guaranteed spots for Ossining. You're coming, again, I want to truly impress upon you. What E4All is doing in other communities and what we're seeing happening there is great, right? Do I believe that, again, we have people here who would benefit from the program? Absolutely. But you're coming to this body and you're asking for taxpayer dollars, and it's not necessarily going to benefit people here in Ossining, but we will be able to house the spot. We'll be able to have office space.
Yeah, so if I could kind of join in with Abby for a couple of minutes. If I could take a step back from your question, Quantel, and just kind of give what I think is the honest perspective of how this whole thing came about. We're now talking about this, I think, as though E4All is trying to convince Ossining that we should bring it here. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing. E4All is far and away the best organization of its kind in the United States. There's no one else like it. It's a pioneer in the area of inclusive entrepreneurship. It's been recognized and has gotten funding from the Kaufman Foundation in Kansas City. It is the premier inclusive entrepreneurship organization in the United States. It started in Massachusetts. When Abby and I first went up there, just visiting and trying to learn about it because we thought we could import some of what they do to bring it here, actually the first points of view that they expressed to us, Deshna Shpanda, one of the founding funders of E4All, said, we're targeting communities larger than Ossining, right? We think that for a variety of reasons, communities of 75 or 100,000 people are where we should start, and that's how we started looking at the situation in Massachusetts. Abby and I spent a considerable amount of time telling them that although Ossining looks like it's only 25,000 people, more or less, you know, when you look up the statistics, we have the diversity, we have the variety of communities, we have the entrepreneurial culture here, so that we think an E4All type of system would work in Ossining. It took over a year of conversations back and forth before they did their own research and concluded that they would consider coming to Ossining. Not to convince us, they don't need Ossining to provide a place so that they can pay rent to it and then service communities outside of Ossining. Abby and I believe that this is a very serious and very unique opportunity for the village, precisely because it would create a place where the village could benefit its own residents. The idea is not, Quantel, the idea is not to create a physical structure here and people from outside of Ossining would come in. Everything that E4L stands for would be made available to the residents of Ossining 100%. The only thing that we responded to over the weekend with a question from last week was this notion of kind of a quota, 51% that was floated, and we explained that that would run counter to the idea of inclusive entrepreneurship. That when you put 15 people in a cohort, in a class, or whatever you want to call it, and you want people that are diverse in virtually every respect, and you want people who have, on a competitive basis, earned their way in with good ideas and good potential and the other qualifications necessary to get into one of these things, you don't want to create a situation where an unintended consequence is that you have a half-empty classroom because you've restricted it geographically to an area. But if you look practically at how E4All gets its cohort participants, I mean, how does it attract people to come? They go deep into the community. We're told stories about they go to barbershops, they go to beauty salons. It's not just a 30-day process where they put up a sign and before you know it, Ossining residents are going to have 2 places, let's say, out of 15. That would be a major concern to us, too. It's not, we're on the same page here, Quantel. So they go deep in the community. They have pitch contests, which are basically organized to tell people about what E4All is at the same time as inviting people to give pitches. They're not part of an application process. They're part of a promotion process to tell people about the center which is started here. And in the same way that Abby and I started Ossining Innovates, and we have 350 people who've signed up on a mailing list for our events, we did it one at a time, house by house, going from, asking people to spread the word and trying to prove that it was worth asking people who join us to spare an evening for us, right? We had to earn that. In the same way, E4All is going to come here, and they're going to have these events and go locally, and everyone in the community hopefully will have an opportunity to learn about what they do. Now, if you ask how many people from the community will wind up in the cohort, I guess I need to ask you how many people will apply. That we can't control, right? We don't know how many people would be interested. We think a huge number of people should be interested because of what E4All does. And you're talking about, again, the best of its kind nationally. Omar mentioned going to the Chamber of Commerce to see what they could come up with. Well, ask them to come up with 10 years of statistics. I mean, Abby and I invited E4All here because we recognized that it would take us 7-10 years to maybe do what these folks have done. So from the point of view of this community, our thinking was, if we can get a premier outfit to come here, rather than try to do exactly what they're doing. I mean, that was our goal, right? We started the conversations, but the ultimate goal was to build an accelerator and to build a unique accelerator that was accessible to people who don't have access to accelerators that are more typical all around the county and in New York City and beyond. We wanted to do something special, different for Ossining, and we found E4All. It was a happy accident. And it took a lot of work to get them to consider coming here. So there is some faith that I guess is necessary, but I don't think that the consideration ought to be mired in a kind of cynical attitude as to what, and I'm not saying anyone in particular, but I don't think there ought to be this collective cynicism about what do these guys want from us? How are they going to scam us? What are they going to take out of our community? It's not about that at all. It's exactly the opposite. It's what they can contribute to the community.
Okay.
And the investment would just, well, I'm sorry.
No, I thought you were done. I was going to try and I feel like we've gone around in a lot of circles tonight, and I think we need to bring this to a conclusion.
I'm done.
I mean, thank you.
Thank you.
Really quick. Thank you, most of you actually had the opportunity to actually address some of the questions that I had, that I had over the weekend. So very interesting and unique program. Definitely, I think all the values Village of Ossining supported with different programs to different nonprofit organizations that we have partnered up with. They're actually I'm supporter of this the resolution at 10:05, so I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you very much.
I'll just, I think there's been a lot of things that were said and asked and reflected upon. I want to just briefly go back to the first time that I heard about Ossining Innovates, and I don't think you were even calling it Ossining Innovates back then. 2016, was it? You started it, and you started reaching out to local officials and county and state officials and local entrepreneurs and people in the community who you wanted to hear from. And you felt that there was something more exciting that could be happening in our community. You wanted to bring more people and vibrancy to our downtown and economic development to our downtown, and you weren't really sure what that was going to look like. And so you started inviting people to stakeholder meetings, and that's evolved into Ossining Innovates, and obviously that's what's brought you to where you are on the journey right now. And that's not a process that we had seen before, but this board and past boards have certainly identified economic development as a top priority for our community. And economic development in the village of Ossining means something different than it does in some other communities. Economic development for us means how can we have a vibrancy to our community that preserves the diversity, socioeconomic and cultural diversity that is emblematic of who we are as a community. We have always been a community of immigrants. We have always been a community that welcomes each new generation. And finding a way to have a growing economy and to encourage the people of our community to see greater success is different than many of what might be considered more traditional economic development models. And so that makes E4All particularly appealing for our community. And so I am delighted that you have brought this opportunity to us. The proposal of the $30,000 a year from the village of Ossining is, I think, something that we get a lot of bang for our buck. It's a program that very much furthers the village's economic development goals. And it is not taking a lot of our staff time. And it is something that I think is going to send a very clear message to the larger community about who Ossining is and who we are looking to be for generations to come. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And I believe it is time to vote.
I actually have some more comments, excuse me.
Oh, okay.
Stuart, well, actually, before I do that, since it looks like it's going to pass, I'm going to have to explain this to our voters and taxpayers tomorrow. So there's nothing we can do to make this Ossining a program that is for Ossining residents only, since taxpayers in Ossining are paying for it.
I think we've kind of answered that question, and both for a number of reasons, and we think it's beneficial for Ossining to do it.
So it's not flexible, so no.
No.
Okay, that's all. Okay. Stuart, can we legally bind boards to future pledges?
Do it in terms of contracts.
So yes. Okay. Thank you.
Stuart, can you explain the third to last resolve where you mentioned this is the resolution, it's the third to last resolve where you mentioned that we would be doing this according to the New York State Constitution. There was some language about that.
Yes, that was basically based upon your concern last week.
Okay, so what is the answer to that as far as like?
I indicated last week that my opinion that the done.
Okay.
But I just wanted to protect the village in the event that it turns out that it can.
Okay, so what has your research show that can be done? What does this look like?
As I indicated last week, this is a legitimate public purpose to do this. This is not considered a gift.
Okay. All right.
I guess he was asking why.
Were you asking why? I mean,
Why is it not a public, why is
well,
it not a gift?
if I may, that's actually more a legal analysis. I'd prefer to do that as an advice of counsel and not in a public session.
So after the vote?
Okay, so
What?
So after the vote?
No, but
So
I'm
can
just
we,
saying-
can I make a motion, we go into executive session?
Our
Can we go
attorney
into-
has given us the legal advice necessary.
He has it though.
He
'cause
just
we asked
said
for it last week.
that we have to go into exec session in order for him to go into that information.
Now, all he's going to do is explain to us that it's okay.
Well, that's not what he said. He said that he,
What I said was that this was a legitimate public expenditure which would not be considered violative of the New York State constitutional provision regarding gifts.
and we asked you why, and you said that you wouldn't be able to do that here or now, or, I mean,
Well, it would require a much longer dissertation with a memo to you folks going through what all the constitutional provisions are. If you want that, I can do that, but I mean, that's a lengthy discussion. And we've had that discussion on other matters. I can do it if you want. I'll leave it up to you.
I would like to move the resolution and continue on this, and we have one more item in new business, sure?
So I
Trustee
just,
Bazemore, were you done?
yeah, no, I wasn't. So I just want to say, again, believing in the mission of E for All, it seems like a great program, but to sit here and say, one, that it's furthering our economic goals, that there's truly going to be a benefit from Ossining, and again, having 10 years of information, I mean, I still have questions about the data. So again, we are pushing forward a program, giving $30,000 to a program where there's so many more questions than answers, right? Like I asked we had some very poignant questions last week. All of them are not answered today. And even with the data, that's not enough information for me to say, hey, Ossining is going to benefit. Because truthfully speaking, the reality is we can have 30 participants, 2 be from Ossining. Some people buy some coffee. We spent $30,000. This honestly speaking, this is something that the county should be doing because it goes far past the geographical location of the village of Ossining. So that's just a difference of opinion that we have on this board.
We agree to disagree.
I would just say your coffee is now going to be the speaking. I just think it's beyond the pale at this point. The real issue, however, is that nothing here is mutually exclusive. Whether the county does it or the county doesn't have a seat. So the county will have to choose a place to do this, even if the county decides that they want to be the ones. And you should be going to the county, by the way, and I didn't hear you say that you're not going to the county. So I don't get this whole mutually exclusive stuff that's happening here. Many of the entrepreneurs, excuse me,
You don't get what you asked
excuse
for.
me, many of the entrepreneurs that currently work here are members of the chamber or not members. Some of them live here, some of them don't. Some of the employees live here, some of them live in the surrounding areas. It's the way a lot of the businesses are run, and so this is actually not very different than a current model that we've had for over a century. The businesses that we currently have here, entrepreneurs, service, or not-for-profits, or anything else, employ X number of people. We've always supported that, and we've always known that while some live here, some don't. It's not going to be, in my opinion, different, frankly, based on the experience and the history. So I don't use the word startup because, frankly, startups are the first time that they're doing a model. This model's been around for quite a while, so it's okay to use any words we want. For me, it's not a startup. I would like to move to vote on this because I believe that enough information has been shared, and I believe that these folks have websites that any of us could have gone to, and at this point, I at least, for me, am ready to vote. So I'd like to make a motion.
My final comment is, again, the idea, one, Trustee Levin, with all due respect, is you are the one who asked for the provision for 55% to go to Ossining.
Right.
Two, the notion that this accelerated program is actually going to produce brick and mortar businesses, that may not necessarily be the case, right? Like you can have an accelerator that creates an online business. Again, with respects to the taxpayer, with respect, because this is language many of you, that many at this table talk about, right? If we're not creating brick and mortar, right? We don't have available commercial spots, right? And then when we sit here and we talk about economic development, we primarily are talking about brick and mortar commercial properties, all right? So again, I've said what I said as far as what Ossining taxpayers will get, as far as tax revenue or whatever the case may be, yeah, I've said what I said.
Okay,
We can proceed with it.
fair enough.
Well,
Okay.
thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and questions. Madam Clerk?
Wait, we have a motion, I just need a vote. All those in
Well,
favor?
you have to
Yeah,
actually.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Nay.
Opposed?
Nay.
And nay.
Continuing business of the board.
Yes. No, no.
I do actually.
Okay.
So, given the resolution that we passed, I had to, I just had it. Hold on.
You know, I just while
You know
you're
what, I'll
looking
just
while you're
ask.
looking for
Of
that,
course.
while you're looking for that, let me just we have an extended executive session, one here and one in another building. Given the hour, should we postpone and reschedule the second portion of our executive session for this evening?
That person is there.
That person is there waiting and has been there. Well, that person has been there for 40 minutes.
Yeah, then I'll just wait on this then. I'll just wait on what I was going to bring up under new business unless, yeah.
Continuing business.
Continuing business, excuse me.
Okay, I mean, I was just trying to,
Yeah.
you know, it's almost 11 o'clock. We all start getting a little slap happy.
I mean,
Hour.
my item can wait, so that's fine.
So I'll move into new business.
All righty, new business.
Resolution appointing members of the Ossining Police Department to the Civilian Police Complaint Review Board, whereas pursuant to the Village of Ossining Code Section 8-5A, membership of the Civilian Police Complaint Review Board, CPCRB, shall consist of 7 members appointed by the Board of Trustees, and whereas pursuant to Village of Ossining Code Section 8-5A2, 2 members shall be appointed from nominees selected by the Chief of Police from the personnel of the village's police department. 1 police representative shall be a line officer, the other senior officer, and whereas pursuant to Village Ossining Code Section 8-5A3, alternate members on behalf of the police department shall be appointed by the Board of Trustees. Now therefore be it resolved that upon nomination by the Chief of Police, the Board of Trustees appoints Lieutenant Richard Damiano and Police Officer Anthony Perillo as members of the CPCRB and appoints Sergeant Brendan Donahue and Police Officer Patrick McGovern as alternate members of the CPCRB, replacing Lieutenant Aaron Zimmerman and Sergeant Joseph Spinelli, and be further resolved that the appointments are for 2-year terms from the date of the appointment. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Chief Sylvester, for nominating these fine representatives of the police department to serve on the committee, on the board.
We have visitor recognition.
Or anybody who would like to address the board? Okay, seeing no one.
Adjournment.
Adjournment to executive session for matters of personnel as well as,
Can I
yes.
just want to, I know we're on camera, but.
Okay.
You need the audio?
Well, but mine's on.
I can talk to her first. At pressing? But can't that wait though? I mean, what is he gonna say is that like, why can't we do that first and then his stuff wait till next week? Question.
Okay, so we are adjourned. What is the motion that we're adjourning to matters, executive session for matters of personnel related to specific persons and to executive session in our capacity as Board of Police Commissioners to discuss a matter of.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for joining us. We will be next week at our work session at the 16 Croton Avenue Village Hall. This meeting is adjourned to executive session.